is being held to conform to the state legislation amended Section 16 of the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. The budget hearing was publicized in the local newspaper, and we will open the meeting for questions and discussion on the 2020-2021 budget and tax millage rate. First, we're going to have Mr. Rathbun go over a little short presentation.
Thank you, President Drew. You should all have before you a copy of the presentation this evening. Anita, if you would be willing to share the screen so that others at home can follow along.
Yeah, actually, Tim's going to do your two. I have the other ones.
Okay, Tim. All right, Tim, if I can have you move to the next slide. This is our presentation. So as you can see, in 2020, our taxable values grew considerably, which is great news. You can see our non-homestead operating, which includes primarily businesses, nobody's primary residence. That increased by about $21 million or 9.15%. We'll talk a little bit more about the impact of that in just a moment. All the other properties you can see there increased roughly $51 million or 3.86%. And that's really the total tax base that we use to levy our debt millage on. And as I'm doing this presentation, if there are any questions the board has, please feel free to ask those questions and I'll be happy to try and answer those for you. But if there are no questions, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So many of you probably understand already what the Hedley effect is. This is a constitutional item that is required anytime we have an increase in our tax base. We talked about earlier that we had about a little over a 9% increase in our tax base for the non-homestead properties. And what happens in that case is if the property tax value is growing faster than the rate of inflation, you are taxed or hit with a Hedley rollback. And what that effectively does is it lowers the rate of mills that you can levy on the tax base, and therefore you have a Hedley rollback. You may remember we had one of these in the past, and we passed another millage. So we'll talk about that too. But this year it looks like based on that increase of 9.15, we're going to have a Hedley rollback. And so if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So you may remember back in November of 2019, our voters approved a 2.0 mill restoration that restored our millage up to the full 18 mills and restored our full funding. And it also provided a hedge, if you'll remember, against future Hedley rollbacks like we're experiencing right now. So it was very foresightful of administration and the board, and very foresightful of the taxpayers in the community to pass a 2.0 millage, allowing us to have that hedge against a future rollback, which we incurred this year. So Tim, if you'll go to the next slide. You can see here we had a Hedley reduction of 0.9912, resulting in a decrease of 1.733 mills for the district. Fortunately, as I talked about, we had a few of the mills set on the shelf that we could use. So we implemented and used some of those mills, and as a result, we're going to be able to leverage the full 18 mills. So we will, in 2020-21, leverage the full 18 mills. And out of that 2.0 mills that we levied back, or that the voters approved back in November of 2019, you can see we still have about 1.5 mills that are still being kind of held back to hedge really against future Hedley rollbacks. Are there any questions about Hedley that I can answer for the board? Hearing none, I'll move on to the next slide. We also have another hurdle that we need to address as a part of this budget hearing, and that's called the Truth and Taxation. So Truth and Taxation is similar to Hedley. It talks about any time the taxable property value increases that we're subject to a rollback. That the Truth and Taxation does not even take into effect the inflationary factor. It just says any increase whatsoever to the taxable value of the properties, and the millage that results from that is unallowed unless we have a public meeting such as this and the board agrees to levy the full 18 mills. So that is our recommendation to the board tonight, is that they would, through this public meeting, approve a full levy under the Truth and
What would
Taxation,
it show right here?
and we would levy non-homestead 18 mills. Debt retirement is not subject to any sort of Truth and Taxation or Hedley rollback, so this is really just affecting our general fund. Any questions on Truth and Taxation? Okay, if not, I'll have you move to the next slide. So here you can see our entire tax levy that we intend to levy for the 2021 school year, which includes 18 mills for the non-homestead operating millage. It also includes 10 mills for the debt retirement, so that we can pay all of our bonds and so forth that we've levied over the last 20 or 30 years, and leaves us with a total mill levy of 28 mills. And we'll levy half of that here in the fall and another half in the later in the winter. I should say in the summer, and then again the other half in the winter.
Speak, I'm not gonna be able to. I didn't get it.
So, Tim, I'm not sure if there's someone hasn't been muted. If we can get that. Are there any questions from the board on what we intend to levy for 2021? Okay, moving on to the next slide. As we get ready to share with you our proposed budget for the 2021 school year, I wanted to take you through just a little bit of a historical look at our fund balance, and we're using the Treasury as opposed to the percentage over expenditures. We're going to focus on Treasury for the purposes of this presentation, which is really the percentage of fund balance, or the fund balance over or divided by the unrestricted revenues that we receive from federal government and the local as well. So with that said, you can see that in 2014-15, we had a fund balance of about 9.18, went up to 13.34 the following year. In 16-17, it dipped a little bit to 11.69, and then came back up a little bit in 2017-18. 18-19, it came down a little bit to 10.19. I think the significance really of those 4 or 5 years there kind of shows that as we were going along, there were some dips and some increases and dips and so forth. But, you know, we were able to kind of maintain our fund balance, and even with increases to staff, steps and so forth. But we do see a pretty precipitous drop, and we'll talk more about that as we get later into the meeting when we talk about 19-20. But you can see there it drops from about 10.2% fund balance down to about 3.44. And we'll touch more on that in the actual meeting when we're talking about 2019-20. But I'm going to keep moving forward to 2021 as that's the subject of this budget hearing. You can see there right now we're looking at going down to about a 0.23. Which is not a significantly large fund balance. At that point, you're pretty much down to zero. So,
Steve Middlestad. So
yeah, Steve.
what's just showing here is that we were averaging for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years around 11%, and then it dropped from 10% to basically zero within 2 years.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I'll move on to the next slide. So this is the proposed budget for the 2020-21 school year. This was primarily developed by administration. We did share this with our finance committee meeting about a week or so ago, and we got some input from them. I want to be very clear as we're going through this budget that there's a lot of estimates that go into this. There's a lot of unknown information at this point. We don't have a certain foundation allowance, which is a significant amount of our money that we receive from the state. We don't have that information right now. So there are some assumptions in here, and I'm going to go through those assumptions. But before I do that, I want to call your attention down to the very, very bottom of the spreadsheet there. You can see, again, fund balance as a percentage of revenue, which is how Treasury measures it. Again, you can see there where it's going from 10.2 down to 3.44 and down to 0.24. And if you look at the ending fund balance, which is a couple lines above that, you can see that we're down to a fund balance of about $113,305. That is not a significant number when you're talking about $61 or $60 million. It's a very, very, very small number. In fact, it's less than 0.25%. So very likely, if there's any misses on this or any changes that are made to the budget, we could have a situation where it's much worse than it looks today. So let me run through some of the assumptions. I'll be happy to field any questions, but and then I want to come down and make a point that we need to really look at cutting expenses here to try and build that fund balance back up. So you can see in our local revenues, there we budgeted about $6 million. That's an increase of about $400,000. We had a pretty significant increase, as I talked about, in our local tax base. So we're going to get some from that. We also, during the closure last year, and that's really what the variance is comparing. Let me maybe step back for a moment, talk about the chart you're looking at. So the first column there where it says actual audited, that's our 2018-19 school year. And those are the audited numbers that are coming right out of our audit. And so we're providing that for you to compare and contrast that to our proposed budget for the final 2019-20, and we'll talk about that during our meeting. And then we've got our original budget that we're proposing for the 2021 school year, and that's in that pink column there. And then the final column is comparing the proposed final budget for 2019 to the proposed original budget for the 2021 school year. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that third column and the assumptions that go into that, and then some of the variances and what are causing those variances. So as we talked about, the local revenue is a little bit higher. We also will have a lot of our SAC and our childhood programs that were closed down due to COVID-19. So we're expecting those to come back in 2021. That's the increase. For our state sources, we kept our foundation flat. We talked with the finance committee about this, and because we don't really know which way the governor's gonna go and which way the foundation's going to go, up or down. There's been a lot of talks of cuts, but Governor Whitmer has also talked about trying to keep it flat. So for now, we are keeping it flat, but we're also baking in about 100 student decrease. So that's why you see that going down about $1 million. Our federal sources have increased a little bit. That's primarily our CARES Act money. Some people may know it as ESSER, but it is out of the CARES Act that was approved during the COVID situation, I think in April or May. And so we are getting a little bit of additional funding there. Finally, the last revenue item, you see incoming transfer, went from about 800,000 up to about 2.6. And that is really a combination of a couple things. We know that we passed our enhancement millage here in Macomb County, which is awesome. We're getting about $2.5 million from that. But that's going to be offset a little bit by the fact that we're not going to have the transfers in that we think we at this point, we don't know, but at this point we're budgeting conservatively that we will not have those transfers in that we normally have from the international fund. So that's why you see an increase there of about $1.8 million to our revenues. Are there any questions on the revenues before I move forward? All right. Moving on to instruction. So there you can see about a 526,000. Oh, I'm sorry, Tim. Perfect. Thank you. Moving on to the expenditures, you can see that we've got about $38.6 million as opposed to the $39 million we had in 2019-20. That's a decrease of about $526,000. At this point, we have a number of teachers that are retiring. We are moving in a direction right now, we hope, with scheduling, and we'll be taking a close look at that scheduling. But we want to do this through attrition. We're hoping to move in a way that we don't have to cut people's jobs, but we may have to, and we'll talk more about that. But at this point, that $526,000 is really just attrition. And then as we move down, there aren't significant variances. We've added a little bit money back in the operations and maintenance because we know that we had some savings as a result of closing our buildings. We weren't running as many lights or heating as much, and so there's some savings there that we have to add back in 2021, assuming normal operations. Same in the transportation. We weren't running our buses nearly as much, so there's some savings there in terms of repairs and diesel fuel. So you can see there coming down, and I want to focus on that third column now. You can see still, though, that we're looking at expenditures of about $63.3 million as opposed to total revenue of $61.8 million, leaving us in the hole $1.5 million. So what's happening is, if you, Tim, if you can scroll down just a hair, I want to focus on the bottom of this slide. A little bit more, please. No, sorry. There we go. Is there any way to move that up, or maybe it's just me? I gotta get it. I gotta move my mouse maybe. But anyway, as Tim's adjusting that, what I want to focus on is that we are proposing right now to lose about $1.5 million, and if we lose that $1.5 million, that's going to bring our fund balance down to literally zero. It's going to be really close to zero.
Hey, Tom.
And we are going to need to make some serious cuts to our expenditures. And if you'll recall, in my assumptions, we did not at this point include any sort of cut coming to our foundation. If that foundational cut is even as little as $300, that's another $1.8 million that we're going to need to cut. So right now, in talking with the finance committee, we talked to them about, administration is developing a list of cuts. These cuts will be across the board. I don't think any group will be, not impacted by this. I think every group will be impacted by this. You got to recall that between 85 and 90% of our costs are people related. They're salary and benefits. And so, we are looking across the organization at all groups, all areas, to try and figure out where we can make some cuts. Obviously, we want to stay as far away from impacting instruction as we can. And we want to make sure that we're doing the very best we can for our students, but we are going to have to make cuts. And they're going to be sizable cuts. So we're developing that list. Our thought process is that we will be very nimble in that way. If the governor comes back with a $300 cut, a $200 cut, a $100 cut, a $500 cut, we will then be able to quickly identify those cuts that need to come. And I'm talking about the cuts to the foundation. We will quickly come up with cuts to the expenditures that we can make so that we can get back to break even. And so I really believe at this point in time, we're ending the 2019-20 at 3.44% treasury for a fund balance as a percentage. We need to cut $1.5 million more out of the 2020-21 budget to stay at that 3.44%. So we're going to have to make cuts there. And I'm going to move to the next
Hey, Todd.
slide. Yes.
Just a quick comment. So we're talking about we're near zero for treasury. Reality is the new zero is really 5%. So when you're describing where we are, when you say we're at 3.4, we're really minus 1.6 in terms of what the treasury expects, because the treasury expects us to have a balance of around $3 million or 5%. So when you look at the 2021 budget, you're saying we're near zero. No, we're almost minus 5% below the treasury requirement. So you got to keep that in context, because you miss the context if you don't understand that 5 or 8 years ago, zero was the bottom. From the state standpoint, 5% is the bottom. So we're showing a minus 5%, and you're hoping if we could cut 1.5, we can get back up to 1.5. We have to get to 5%.
Yeah, Steve, you're spot on with what my next kind of comment was going to be, is that, we are now, we'll project when we end our fiscal year for 2019-20, we will be on the, list for Treasury as a, what they call a fiscally at-risk district. And so you're exactly right. In order to get off that list, we have to build our fund balance, not only stay even, but we really have to build our fund balance back up.
Right. So when you said if we cut 1.5, that doesn't build any fund equity. It just gets us.
It does not.
back to where we're at.
It does not.
Correct.
Yep. So I think, really that's the minimum, Steve, I think is maybe what I'm trying to say, is that's the minimum that we need to cut just to stay flat. We probably need to cut more if we want to get back. We absolutely have to cut more if we're going to get back to the 5%.
And I had a question. This is Lisa. I wasn't able to unmute myself for a little bit, so I'm back.
That's okay. Okay.
On you.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you explain where you got your enrollment decrease estimate from? I'm asking only because I know last year we were closer to almost closer to 200 less enrollment before we accounted for the Chinese students coming over and fixing that difference a little bit. And now, of course, we may be out them as well. That would be close to 60, and we're only, I guess I'm a little concerned about estimating an enrollment decline.
Yeah. So I can try and speak to that. So we're looking at, we are taking into account the international students, that's for sure. We're also looking at kind of what our outgoing class is relative to our incoming class. I will tell you, Lisa, we're kind of looking back at last year because we have slower than normal enrollments this year, just as a result of the COVID, I think. But we're looking at that data. We also have a study from Middle Cities that we're looking at. And we also, believe it or not, take a look at kind of what birth rates are doing to see what we think is going to happen. So there's a number of factors that go into it. I think it's a reasonable estimate. We may have to adjust it down as we move forward. At this point, we think it's reasonable. There's a lot of assumptions that go into this, and if we find that we do need to adjust it down as we go forward, of course we're going to do that, and we will make the addition. That's going to result in additional cuts that we have to make in order to do what Steve talked about, is getting back to that 5%. But again, that's what the district is working on, identifying these cuts that we can make, so that the school can go forward in a way that's least impactful on instruction. Okay.
Hey.
Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Hey, Todd, this is Patrick. I wanted to ask about the incoming transfers part of the revenue. Sorry, I was suffering from the inability to unmute myself as well. It's just,
No, that's okay. All right.
for 18-19, we had 775 roughly, 19-20, 825. But for some reason, that number jumps up for 2021 to 3 times what it was in 1920. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. So it's really of a combination of two things, Patrick. So what's showing up in there, the big increase, if you will, is due to the county enhancement millage. So that is not a millage we levy directly. It's actually levied by the Macomb County ISD, and then it's transferred through to us. So that's why we show it as an incoming transfer. But we're also of the mind that we're not going to get the international transfer that we've had in the past. So that's also kind of taking it back down. So the combination of, the increase in the enhancement millage and the decrease in the international fund transfer is really what is that $1.8 million difference.
So at 2.6, you're projecting is it 440 per pupil?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? If not, Tim, can I have you go to the next slide?
All right.
This is something that I wanted to share with the board. Also, I think this kind of speaks to the exigency of making cuts this year. And again, please understand that this does not include any cuts that the governor might propose to our foundation. But you can see there, if we look at the second column, that's what we just talked about, that original proposed budget for 2021. And what we did is we just said, if we roll forward, and what we did is we had about a 70 student decrease in 2021, but kept the foundation the same. We had another 50 student decrease in 2023. And again, Lisa, this is kind of looking at incoming and outgoing classes. That bubble's eventually going to disappear as we get further and further down the road. So those are the changes that we made. You'll also notice when we come down, 3/4 of the page down to total expenditures, we kept those flat. But if you look at the ending fund balance, you can see again in that second column, we're proposing it to be about 0.24, or a little less than 1/4%. But if we don't make these cuts, what you can see is with that decrease in student enrollment and keeping expenditures flat, which we all know, prices go up on things typically. So I think this is kind of a rosy picture, even at best. Then we have a loss in 2021 of about 2.2 million, and that takes our fund balance down to 2.126 in the negative, and actually flips that treasury down to about a negative 5%. So you're going from, like Steve would say, from being under 5 to now you're under 10. And you can see if we don't do anything for another year into 2023, now our fund balance is a negative $5 million, and we're 10.77% in the hole. So that's why, I know you've heard Leonard say it before. I echo his comments. If we can make cuts this year, it really helps us out down the road, because every dollar that you can cut this year, really acts like $2 or $3, in the coming years. So I know this isn't the rosiest of pictures. I can tell you that we're going to work very, very, very hard at trying to make the best decisions we can make. But truly, I want to stress to the board that we're going to have to make significant cuts to our budget. And this is really kind of a structural deficit that we've talked about in the past, where we've signed contracts and we've obligated ourselves in a way that our expenditures are more than we're bringing in. And that's what we call a structural deficit. And we've got to do some things in the expenditures to start trying to address that. So Tim, if you'll go to the next slide, I'd be happy to field any questions right now that the board may have regarding the 2021 school year.
All right. Any questions from the board members, or anybody can unmute themselves? Just raise your hand or something. We'll get you unmuted. Anybody? All right. Seeing none, we will, motion to adjourn that part of the meeting. Anybody?
I'll
Make the motion.
second it.
Motion been made,
I'll second.
seconded. All right, motion's been seconded. We got a vote by roll, Lisa. since we're online.
Ms. Akavetti Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
and Burkmeyer, yes.
All right. Now, meeting adjourned. Now we'll move to our regular board meeting tonight. So we'll call it to order, and if we could have everybody rise where you're at, and if you got an American flag, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic
for
for
which it
which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Finely tuned machine. So now, if I could have, we're doing a little backwards, Lisa, but if you could call the roll. I'm going to finally remember.
All right, Ms. Akavetti Hendershot,
Here.
Mr. Drew,
Here.
Mr. Middlestat,
Here.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes, here.
Mr. Green,
Yes, here.
Mr. Moses,
Here.
and Burkmeyer here.
All right. Now we'll go to Superintendent Woodside for a end of the year program updates. You're on mute, so you gotta, oh, there we go.
Am I unmuted? You hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is take this opportunity just to highlight some of the things that we did at the end of this school year. And as we know that it was pretty challenging with the closure, and that's something that none of us expected. But I can't say enough what a great job our staff did. I know when we first had the closure, one of the important things we wanted to do is provide meals out to our community and out to our students, and we were able to do that. And we were able to do it not only with the food service staff stepping up and doing it, but we had transportation staff delivering the meals out to the buildings so students, parents could come in. And we had, we had paras, we had secretaries, we had teachers all coming in and helping out in the kitchens to get those meals going. And we did not miss a beat. And I can't say enough how proud I am of the staff that when we were faced with this emergency, there was no question. They just stepped right up and they made it happen. So I think, we're all proud of that. And in the highlights, I wanted to share with the elementary, what was done at the elementary grades. And I'll start it with the elementary welcome. And you can see there that many of our staff reached out, our administrators and teaching staff reached out to our students. These are the new students that are our future TARs, kindergartners coming to Anchor Bay this coming school year. So it was great to see them go out. They're, welcoming the families with the lawn signs, and then also giving them, a packet to get them ready for school. And that included, books, crayons, scissors, things like that to get those students, ready for school in those activity packets. So that was great to see the staff go out to see those students and welcome our future TARs. That was great to see. Then we also had our student, pick up, and I know that when we first had the closure, we're getting calls how students could get things out of their locker. We had to follow the executive orders, but when we were able to do it, we took the necessary precautions so students, parents could come and pick up their items through what we had set up as a drive-through. And I want to thank, all of our building administrators for doing a great job, our principals stepping up and going above and beyond to help us with that. We also had office staff and our custodians, also helped us, and they all did a great job of getting us through that. And then, we have what our 5th grade graduation, many of us call it, and we know that the students missed out on that due to the closure. And what had happened is the staff at all the buildings had gotten together and wanting to recognize our 5th graders going on to middle school. So the staff was there and the families were able to kind of come through with, in a car parade. And our staff was there to clap and celebrate and give the students their opportunity to say goodbye to their teachers and their, building principal. So that was a great idea. It went off great. And that's how we celebrated our 5th graders, graduating. And then on to, our secondary, highlights, our high school, the 2 middle schools had done some virtual events and also did some drive-through celebrations of their own. So at the middle school, as you'll see before you, the middle school north was able to reach out, to their students and their parents, and they put together videos for their academic awards, athletic awards, the perfect attendance, student of the month. And that was great to see the administrators, the office staff, and our teachers step up and put that together to reach out, to our students during this time. Middle School South, they also put together a 119-slide PowerPoint movie sent out to all of the parents to share, with our students. And that was great. And again, the staff and our teachers stepping up to reach out to those families during this unprecedented closure and trying to do our best to reach out to those students and try to make it as similar to what we could under the circumstances, similar as what we could make it for awards night. Middle school wave parade. So we also had at the middle schools, they did a wave parade, saying goodbye and farewell to the students. And it also let the students see their teachers. And you could see from, what we have here, you could see the staff lined up and ready to greet the kids. And I'm sure during the closure and the several weeks that had gone by, that this was just a great opportunity for our families to come in and see the staff and say goodbye to their teacher for the school year. And then at the high school, we were able to do a commencement ceremony participation where we allowed in front of the high school, we had it set up. I want to thank the teachers and Mr. LaPerriere and Joe McDonald for pulling all this together. I think it went off great. And many parents were very happy with this opportunity. And as you can see, we had, over 350 students participate. It was set up at the front of the high school, and when they pulled up in their cars, students were able to get out and walk across the stage and celebrate our commencement ceremonies. And we still have our commencements planned for July 25th and the 26th if it rains. We're still moving forward with those plans. We did an email out to staff out to parents to make them aware that we're moving forward. But that was a great day where the students were able to walk across stage, and then they also received their awards. They received a T-shirt for the senior class. So that was something the staff at the high school, they all pulled together and tried to do everything they could to celebrate these seniors. We all agree, during this closure, this has been a really difficult time for all of our students K-12, but our seniors really missed out on a lot of things their senior year. And we've really tried to do everything we could to celebrate those senior students with a ceremony such as this. We also had our virtual scholarship program done, and as you can see, we had 63 of our Anchor Bay High School graduates receive scholarship money. And that's an impressive list. As you see, the Anchor Bay Community Foundation, great job, gave out $34,000 in scholarship. The ROTC, through fundraisers, they had scholarships of $8,000. The ABEA, that's our teacher group, they had scholarships of $4,500. The Anchor Bay High School staff did scholarships and did an impressive $7,800. And we also had scholarships from Rotary and the Anchor Bay Sports Boosters. So that's great to see that all of those different groups come together, provide scholarships for, you know, our graduating TARs, do everything we can to help them be successful after Anchor Bay High School. So I wanted to take this opportunity to not only share with the board all the things that the staff stepped up and did, but I want to thank all of the students for the great job they did. I understand the difficulty. In many instances, we really hit it out of the park, did a great job. In instances, we have areas where, you know, we need to improve on and address. That's exactly what we're doing. We're working on those things, and we'll be doing that, you know, over the summer. But I can't say enough how proud we are of all of our Anchor Bay staff, how proud we are of all of our students during this very difficult, unexpected, you know, closure that we had. Thank you.
All right. Very nice presentation. Thank you. That was, you know, seeing all that stuff go on was great. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Woodside? Any board members?
I don't have
Comments?
a question. But
All
John,
right.
I was. John,
What's that?
sorry. I don't have a question for Mr. Woodside, but I was wondering if we could just add a discussion topic to the agenda.
Well, I'm probably gonna, if you're talking about the grading, I was just about, if there was no questions for Mr. Woodside, yes, the curriculum committee met prior to this meeting, and before we get into open forum, because I know that every board member's been getting a lot of calls about the grading and what went on, you know, with the credit, no credit, and the grades. And you know, obviously, I've received a lot of emails and to the board emails as well. So we had the curriculum committee meet prior to this meeting to talk about that, go over it, come up with any ideas. So I figured at this point, because it might be able to answer some of the questions that come up, if the curriculum committee would like to, you know, a rep from the curriculum committee would like to give a little talk about what you guys talked about, especially when it comes to the grading.
What part of the agenda is this on?
It's
Board comments or?
no, it's just if there's an issue with it, we can take a vote and add it. If you'd like to be proper, we can do that. So go ahead and make the motion. Did I lose Lisa?
I'm here. Okay, so I'll make a motion to add discussion about student grades to the agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on adding it?
My only discussion is I would have liked to know beforehand so I could have researched it and been more informed. So that's the reason I'm kind of objecting for it to be entered. So.
I'll say that it's more of a, I see your point, Steve. I was more of wanting to get information out. It's something that's came up last meeting, and it's no secret. It's a very hot button topic when it comes to grading, and there's really no good way. You know, most schools I think have gone with the credit, no credit.
Yep.
So,
Well,
but I
I'm just
think
trying to clarify.
we owe it to our
my objection
parents
is not
to-
because we're violating the board rules. It's just I just feel uncomfortable adding an item without having all the background information. So that's all.
Okay. Any other discussion? Vote by roll, Lisa.
Ms. Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
yes,
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
and Burkmeyer, yes.
All right. I still would like to insert that at this point prior to board comments. Again, I'm just trying to get information out to the parents. So I don't know who would like to be, I think Janine or Maria.
Well,
What's
John,
that?
unless Marie objects, I said, unless Marie objects, Joe McDonald is prepared to make some
Yes.
comments, and I think he's the best person to address the concerns.
Okay.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, as it, when it comes to grading with the continuity of learning plan, just to kind of bring everyone up to speed, when the governor shut down schools, March 13th, we were 6.5 weeks into quarter 3. And during that time, we kind of unexpectedly shut down. We went into kind of a holding pattern where we put out enrichment packets. Staff worked feverishly to put these together, and not knowing how long we would be out or if we would be coming back. In the past, if we ever shut down and maybe for a short period come back, but we were down for 3 weeks at that point, and then led us into our spring break. During that time, then the governor kind of came out with her executive order 35, which talked about our continuity of learning plan, gave us all the parameters to the continuity of learning plan, and within that kind of gave the grading to the local districts to figure out pass fails, the issuing of grades. And in her speech kind of contradicted that by saying no one would be negatively impacted by the virus, or the closure, I should say, not the virus. So immediately as when it comes to grades, of course the biggest issue becomes at the high school level, where you have grade point average and class rank becomes a very important topic to parents. As being a former high school principal, that is very much on the minds of the students and parents. So during that time, these types of grading issues were discussed at the county level. I know that at the county level, this came up at the MAC principals. Just share a screen here. I got a little presentation to help out. At the MAC principals meeting, I know I discussed it at length with Mr. LaPerriere. Again, the high school being the most significantly impacted or most important when it comes to GPA. And at that time, it was really clear that the vast majority, 90% of Michigan or Macomb high schools were going to give credit versus issuing of grades. There was a lot of uncertainty at the time about, the impact that the virus would have on us as a whole in society, let alone schools. MDE put out a learning at a distance manual in April, and they in that manual strongly suggested giving credit and not letter grades. And Advanced Ed also, which is now called Cognia, they are the organization that gives us accreditation. They also kind of recommended that we would give credit. So at that point, we had a to put together the continuity of learning plan. So our group, Anita, if you can go to the next slide. But as we built our continuity of learning plan, you know, we had these conversations. We had conversations with curriculum directors, superintendent groups, had conversation. The principals talked about it at the high school at length. And we talked about our biggest concern was equity during the pandemic, and just didn't feel it would be fair to impact class rank and GPA. And your GPA that we have at the high school, that's typically, it's not typically, it is for your transcripts, is calculated by your semester grade. So the semester is, you know, 2 quarters, which is 20 weeks. So the 20 weeks of content plus a final exam. And at the time of closure, we had 6.5 weeks completed of the 3rd quarter. And the concern was locking, you know, to the best way we felt to in the county and Anchor Bay and most of the county felt like the best way to keep it fair and to not have it impact class rank and GPA would be just to freeze the GPA where it was. There was some talk about taking the 3rd quarter grade and extending it through to the 2nd semester. And what our biggest concern is with that, and what we discussed with the committee, is that would then take, you know, 6.5 weeks, and we'd give student credit for essentially what would be 20 weeks of work and a final exam, knowing that during the continuity of learning plan, our teachers had to take the state standards and curriculum that was left to cover and condense that into a much shorter period, and figure out just what are the essential standards that need to be covered. And then in doing so, during that shutdown, right, the teachers were having, the students were asked to do 2 to 3 hours worth of work a day, and teachers were available on office hours, and you know, they were managing their own homes through the pandemic, and our teachers they did a wonderful job adapting on the fly to the continuity of learning plan. But it pales in comparison to sitting with that teacher every day, you know, for a full class period. You know, teachers being able to read students' body language, whether or not they're getting things, even if they don't ask questions, teachers know when students aren't getting it. They're able to review things. All those little details that our kids, you know, due to the pandemic and the situation that we were put in a matter of days, it just didn't seem like we wanted to roll into giving letter grades that would impact GPA and class rank and account for a semester of work. So those are the things that we took into account for our with our committee. Like I said, it was discussed at length. We knew that there wouldn't be a perfect solution. We felt like we made the decision at the time based on the information that we had, and that what we thought would be in the best interest of most students, and just didn't want to have any GPAs or class ranks inflated, and did not want to have have some kind of impact because of the inequity of what was going on in some homes. Students had technology, they had parents available to help. In other homes, they didn't. Parents were still working, kids were kind of on their own. And it was difficult. It was difficult for our students. It was difficult for our teachers. So we just kind of felt that we would like to freeze things the way they were when it comes to GPA and class rank, and that we knew that schools in the state, not only our state, but in the nation, were facing the same types of things. colleges are aware of this pandemic. This is not a secret to anybody. And, you know, we have heard throughout the state that, you know, colleges understand that there's kind of there's a freeze in most schools, GPA and class rank. So these were some of the information. I know that I did speak to some parents about this. I spoke to one today, and in some cases, you know, students that were honor students are I mean, every student is interested in their GPA and concerned, but if we apply it, we wanted to be able to do it evenly, and in some cases, applying GPA at that closure time, being in an unfinished situation, it would have actually brought many GPAs down. And at the time, we just felt like freezing it was the most fair thing to do. So I don't know if that summarizes it the best I can with short notice.
Thank you for that presentation. Is there anything else from the committee?
I think that the committee did agree that we adapted the learning plan based on all the information we had at the time, that we tried to make it as consistent across the board as possible, and we tried to make it as fair for students as possible. Just to use a grade that would reflect 6.5 weeks of learning out of 20 weeks, and also not including a final, it would only be a meaningless grade on a piece of paper. It's not going to be included in the final semester grade anyway. And as it shouldn't be, because we're only talking about the essential standards that had to be adapted so that we could meet the needs of kids at home and make sure that they, I think the concern was initially too, kids lose a lot over the summer. And so this has added an additional 3 months to that time when there's going to have to be a lot of review, reteaching, supporting students in moving forward, and trying to do the very best that we can to make up for that lapse of having the in-school classroom environment and the support of the teachers. And so I think that as the committee, having heard Mr. McDonald's presentation, it does make a tremendous amount of sense to leave things as they were. I think that the plan that was adopted was excellent in view of all of the factors that were missing at the time that it had to be created and submitted. I think that right now, giving an opportunity perhaps for some to have that grade go on their report card would mean that teachers would have to be called on to come back to revisit all grades. Perhaps there would be disputes in grades. Some maybe requests that students be allowed to resubmit homework or to retake tests. I just feel that the most valid decision that we can make at this time is to follow the plan that we developed and to realize that that semester grade is going to be put on the transcripts. Colleges are very aware of the circumstances that we've had to deal with, and a lot of that's going to be taken into consideration when they're doing, looking at applications for colleges from our high school students and so on. So I think that parents, once they understand both sides of this, once they understand that putting a grade for 6.5 weeks on the report card is really not going to validate anything. It's going to it's not going to impact that semester grade because you're missing an entire semester and also that final exam.
Okay, thank you, Marie.
And on
Lisa?
a side note, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Janine.
Sorry, Janine,
On a
go ahead.
side note, just to make clear, so all of the communities understands that there are 21 school districts in Macomb County. 19 of them did exactly the same thing we did. One of the districts that did not has been doing online learning for 8 years, and so they are completely in a different capacity as far as being able to continue to grade throughout. There was no clink in their armor, so to speak, there for them to have to start something. They continued something. So in reality, I wouldn't count them in the total. So in reality, there was one district that chose to give grades, and they told the parents back in April, and for us to go backwards and say something different now in almost July would be unfair to the families that were in a totally different belief back in March, if that makes sense.
All right. Lisa, did you have something?
Yeah, I had brought this up in the committee today because I think most, if not all of the board members had received probably maybe like 10 or so emails in the last couple of days regarding this issue. So I felt it was important to have this discussion for everybody to hear, all sides. I respect Marie and Janine, they're both K-12 educators or administrators or, were and retired. So they definitely have a knowledge base here, as well as Joe. What I've gathered from the emails that I have received personally, parents are asking for the opportunity to possibly put their child's grade as of March 13th or that date that we ended school in session on their report card and possibly carry that through as their grade instead of the credit that people were given. And Janine and Marie make good points as to why that's not necessarily maybe the right thing to do. And I do believe that some of the points are valid. My personal issue here is I know some of the situations that were presented were of kids who might have been working on turning their grades around or in the middle of that comeback, and of course any progress that they started to make in those 6 weeks isn't reflected by a credit. And I feel for them because, I like to give kids the benefit of the doubt, and I hate to be harsh on kids. So I know that there's a hard place to be here. I also think that, if we kind of have an opportunity to possibly send a message about working hard, and your work might pay off, by allowing the grades to go through, and possibly increasing morale during this terrible situation that, the kids that were trying up until the point that none of us even probably expected schools would get closed, and they did, that they have something to show for that. And I think a lot of the parents that have written, their concern for their students were, their kids were making that comeback or working towards it, and that's just one more semester of GPA that they don't have to help them try to turn that around. So I know that I personally have a difficult time sending an adolescent who might have made personal sacrifices, to try and get their grades up, whether it's sports or other things. The message that hard work doesn't pay off. And while yes, sometimes that is unfortunately true in the real world, it really weighs on me to send that message to an adolescent, that sometimes life is unfortunately cruel. And when we have a possibility to maybe rectify that for you know, whether it's a handful of students or maybe a lot of students, I feel like maybe we should take that opportunity. But I know, you know, I was one of a committee. And like I said, I do respect the things that Janine and Marie brought up, and Joe. I just, you know, as a parent, I still struggle on the issue, and I will freely admit it. And so, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to allowing the grades, but like I said, I'm one person.
May I say just one more thing?
Go ahead.
Okay. I would never send a message that hard work is not or shouldn't be recognized. That would be the last thing I would ever do. But I also think that parents can help their students to understand that these were extremely unusual circumstances, that the grade that if it was on there did not reflect projects, daily homework, to the extent that would have been reflected in covering all standards, that they possibly could have had an exam or two in there where the grade could have decreased. So they need to be proud that they had put in the effort and achieved what they achieved, but that many times we have to go by what is best for the student in general. And I do believe that the credit is going to give the message that, yes, they did give the effort, because those who did nothing will be attending summer school this year. So I do think that we're saying, or I guess asking parents to explain to the student that that grade on the report card is really not what was really important at that time and would not impact the semester grade, but that it is a reflection of who they became as students and the hard work and dedication they put into it. And that's only going to help them to have a better year next year.
Okay.
And John, if I can just briefly,
Janine? Yep.
as in no way, shape, or form am I saying that I agree with Marie, I agree with Lisa. It's a very, very difficult situation to be placed in, because I can guarantee if you make one decision to the left that you're going to affect somebody on the right. So, you know, there's that old saying about, you know, making hard decisions always leaves somebody, you know, sometimes in a worse situation. And I don't want to see that. I can even tell you that during this pandemic, as a college professor as well, we gave our students the opportunity to drop our classes and take W's instead of taking the grades in the class, because we knew a lot of them could not keep up with the online learning platform and having to teach themselves. I really believe across the country, as a school counselor, I can attest that most colleges are not even looking at that third and fourth quarter grade, and are going, you know, not that they're bypassing it, but that they understand that this affected people on a global level. It's not just Anchor Bay district that was affected, and there really is no right or wrong answer here. I mean, heck, I agree with Lisa. My kid has all A's. She had all A's at the end of the 6.5 weeks. So by all means, give her the grade. But is that 6 weeks worth of work, is what Marie is saying, worth 20 weeks worth of work without an exam? And then would that unnecessarily inflate somebody's grade point average, which then might affect someone's class rank? Because then I can guarantee you the person that it affected will be on the phone us emails. So, you know, there's a no-win situation here, but maybe we need to make better decisions come the fall, should we find ourselves in a awkward or similar situation to where we were maybe able to better provide a graded opportunity for students who choose to do an online environment. But I think this is a learning curve for all of us, and that we can take away a great deal from the situation that we've had to experience this past quarter or so.
And I will jump back in and just say that, you know, Mr. McDonald had mentioned as well that, you know, God forbid, but if this situation recurs, you know, next school year or in an upcoming school year, we're fairly confident that things will evolve even more so and look differently. At the very minimum, I don't think the governor is going to allow continued, years of credit, no credit instead of grades for, secondary students. So, I mean, at some level, we ought to figure out a way to keep the kids learning at full speed. So, and he assured it, things are evolving and they're continuing to work. And we're also waiting on the legislature's, well, not the legislature, but the committee's recommendation from the state that was put together. It should be coming out in the next week or so about, how we are going to evolve and how things are going to progress at Anchor Bay as well. So just as an aside, we have definitely, at very minimum, whatever this outcome might be right now, we've, I think people should rest a little bit assured that things, will be taken a little bit differently should there have to be a next time around.
Well, and just one more thing to add. I don't think that or know that people are aware that much of the online delivery system was totally unknown to our teachers. They had to get a week or more of intensive professional development to even learn how to deliver the instruction that they did deliver. And they're to be given a tremendous amount of credit for that. So that professional development piece is now in place, and that will be extended. It will be improved. More support can be provided in the future so that when we get to a point where we are giving grades, we're going to make sure that the kids have the support, not only instructional delivery, but the support necessary to be successful. So we've had a lot to deal with, and I really commend all of the teachers, all of the central office staff, all that they put together to make the greatest educational experience possible under the circumstances available for our students. And just hope to expand that next year.
I think that on that, Marie, I would echo that with, this is something that's been being talked about since this thing first started. I remember conference calls with Mr. Woodside, McDonald, the ABA, and Terry, and talking about how we're going to do this. And I think that's why you see the 19 other schools doing the same things, and all the superintendents were talking together. There's no easy answer here. And either way you go, you're going to send messages you probably don't want to send to some students out there. So this was the best thing we could do at this point. But I know over the coming weeks and month before the next school year, and as the legislature and the governor puts out, how learning is going to happen, we're going to be having a lot of committee meetings. You guys had that curriculum today. There'll be more curriculum meetings, technology, because of, we're going to have to, it's changed the landscape for education, and definitely here at Anchor Bay, we're going to have to, obviously we're in a little bit of a budget crunch right now, but we're going to have to plan for the future. And I know that I got full confidence in our admin team that they're on it and working on it. So does anybody else have anything on this particular issue?
I do have two quick points, Mr. President. Actually, the first one's a question. If a student came home on March 13th and was failing a class, what happened over the next period of time, 3 months, to that student's grade? I guess that's a Joe McDonald question, maybe?
I'll leave that to Joe. I'll let him answer it. He can answer it best.
So at the shutdown, if someone was failing a grade or a class, they were contacted by their teacher. They were contacted repeatedly. We had a tiered system in our plan, so they were, if they did their work with the first contact, if they were failing, they were able to bring up their grade to a passing grade. If they continued to not do their work, then they went up to tiered system to where a counselor or the principal would contact that student and continue to try to get them to do the work. And if we were able to make contact with them and they did their work and they were able to get the passing grade, they were given credit. If we made contact with them and they were already failing, and then they did not do any work, they would still be failing or incomplete.
So I guess my comment there is, obviously we want to do what's best for our students, and I don't want to see any students left behind. However, we allowed a select group of underperforming students to fix their grades and increase their grades, but we didn't afford that same luxury to somebody who might have a C that's trying to move it to a B and an A for the purposes of having it on their transcript. So, and again, I don't want to see anyone left behind. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I felt like, to Lisa's point, that, for example, my son, who had worked hard and maintained all A's and B's, got a credit, and somebody who had done D work for the first 6.5 weeks of the semester, or F work, E or F work, got a D or a C, got promoted. So I know those are tough decisions to make, but as you guys have all stated, we all got plenty of emails from parents and phone calls. So I know we're really in a no-win position for this school year. But I believe Janine mentioned it, we absolutely have to have a plan if this happens next year. Not wait until it happens, but there needs to be a plan put together now that is just a matter of executing and having the curriculum committee meet, put that together, meet with Mr. McDonald, use all those years of experience, Mr. Wedge, get that put together. So it's just a matter of flipping a switch. Hey, look, we're back out of school. Switch gets flipped. And I know there's some technology issues and stuff like that, but we need to be ready for that before that comes to us. The second point I have is, through a lot of my contacts this week, I am hearing that what school districts are expecting from the governor and this task force she put together is going to be very limited, very lacking in detail. And I'm talking to people who are on this committee. They're having a little bit of infighting and frustration going on there, is what I'm being told. And I know we're all waiting until June 30th when this is going to come out. Again, what I'm hearing from people on the committee is that what comes out on June 30 is going to be a pretty loosely put together boilerplate, and that districts are going to ultimately be required to put together their own plan for fall startup. So that's just for, Joe, I know you're working on it. Terry, you guys are working on these things. I don't think you're going to get a Bible delivered to you on June 30th is my only point.
Yeah, we fully intend to prepare for any contingency. We're fully aware of what may lie ahead now. When again the governor came out with Executive Order 35, I believe it was, and then gave her speech, she made it real clear about not allowing anyone to be penalized with the closure. And 6.5 weeks into a quarter, someone could be underperforming, but to think that the kind of leaving someone behind would be, I guess the thought would be not allowing them to receive credit and making them actually then kind of stop where they were and then be deficit of credit. So I think the idea was to allow people to earn the credit, but then again, to protect grade point average and class rank and so on because of the pandemic. But we fully understand that, and it will be a completely different ball game and expectations moving forward.
We have planned later in the agenda to talk about the future and how we are going to have task force and committees that we've already had planned. So that's going to be shared later.
All right. Anything else on this issue from the board? Everybody's frozen. All right, you're moving again. All right. We'll go to open forum. Anita, do we have anybody?
We have one. Cheryl is still here, so let me unmute her. And she had a comment earlier.
Okay. Ms. Stankus?
Hi, you answered my question about the incoming transfers, so thank you for that. My other question was, is there any kind of survey coming out to the parents regarding what we would like to see for next fall? I see a lot of other districts have asked or sent out surveys to their parents, asking them what they would like to see come fall via virtual learning or in-class learning. I was just wondering if the district is going to be doing any of that, sending it out to our parents, and also, are the teachers being included on decisions for the startup of fall next year? Since they're the ones who are going to be dealing with any implements that you guys, or any things that you guys are going to implement into the classroom, I was just making sure that they were being informed or included in these decisions. That was it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else there, Anita?
Nobody has commented to us. Have
I
you
don't see-
checked just your email, just in case?
I'll check the email real quick here.
And anybody that's online, you can just scroll to the bottom and there's a chat box.
If anybody wants to put a thumbs up. Okay, seeing none. We will move on to bills payable. Robin?
Good evening. In front of you, you have the bills payable for May 2020 included in your board packet. Are there any questions in regards to the bills payable that were provided to you?
Is there any questions for Ms. Rand? Anybody?
Just a question on spending in general. Are
Seeing
we,
none. Is there a motion? Go ahead, Steve.
are we putting a moratorium on future spending? Are we just saying we're going to freeze all spending at this point until we understand where we're going? I'm just asking the question.
Todd, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, it's just unmuting. So, Steve, there's not a formal moratorium on spending. Obviously, we are, trying to keep our expenditures low at this point, and make sure that we're only spending on those items that are absolutely necessary prior to the start of the new year.
Okay.
But we're also looking at our cash right now, and we're managing cash. We know we have a heavy July, and so we are also trying to manage cash in that regard and make sure that we have adequate funds to make all of the payrolls that we have in July. So,
Okay.
but no formal moratorium.
All right, thanks.
Is there a motion to accept the bills payable for May 2020 as presented?
I will make
I'll
a
move.
Motion by Marie, is there a second? By Lisa, vote by roll.
Ms. Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. Giroux,
Yep.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
Burkmeyer, yes.
Okay, we got the 2020 bond refunding ratification resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Drew. The board will remember back in April, we brought forward a resolution to refinance some of the school's debt. It was initially thought to be about $92 million. that was corrected to not to exceed 97 million. Well, yesterday we went out and had our bond sale. We sold roughly $96 million worth of bonds. I had initially told you that we would save likely $6 million as a result of this refunding. I have great news for the board tonight and great news for the taxpayers of Anchor Bay District that we were able to sell our bonds at an average true interest cost of 1.929%. Even the individuals that were handling the sale were amazed by the low interest rate that we were able to garner. And we now believe that the savings that will inure to the taxpayers of the district will be over $14.2 million. So this was just an absolute home run for the district, absolute home run for the taxpayers, and you know, some just amazingly great news for our district.
Very nice. Okay, this should be a pretty easy one.
I'm sorry. Yep,
Okay.
Mr. Drew, there is a resolution that also accompanies this, and the resolution is essentially confirming the authority that you already granted to Superintendent Woodside and myself to move forward on the sale. You are now just coming back and essentially you are confirming or reauthorizing that sale. Confirming, I guess, is the best way to say it.
But we don't have the resolution because it's written after the sale, which is, well, the sale was on 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought maybe it did get added to the board packet, but if it hasn't,
It was emailed today.
It was emailed out. I received it.
Okay, I must have missed it. Sorry.
That's okay.
All right.
But again, it's just essentially confirming the sale that was already
motion
occurred.
to ratify that resolution.
I'll make,
Did I hear a motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Moses, is there a second?
I'll support.
Supported by Ms. Hattershot. Vote by roll.
Ms. Akavetti Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yep.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
Burkmeyer, yes.
All right, now we got the approval of the fiscal year 1920 budget amendments.
Yeah, so in your board packet is the 2019-20 final approved budgets. We've got budgets for the general fund, the international fund, our special revenue funds, and also our debt. I'd like to take this opportunity to spend a little bit of time going through the general fund, talking a little bit about what we're projecting as our final budget, speaking to any variances, and answering any questions that the board has on the general fund. So you should have in your board packet, and Anita, if I can have you or Tim put up the 2019-20 proposed final, that would be helpful, I think, to share that with the group. Yeah, so there it is. Thank you very much. So you can see there that we have in that first column our actual audited financials from the 2018-19 school year, as we're required to do under the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act. The item right next to that was the amendment that you all approved back in February. And the third column, our proposed final budget, and then the variances in between. So one thing I want to point out initially before we start going through some of those variances and discussion of our final budget is you will notice that back in February, we projected about a $3.1 million budget deficit. We're projecting about the same. It's only changed by about $55,000. So I feel pretty good that we were pretty accurate back then in terms of identifying what our costs were going to be and increasing the budget accordingly. You can see in the third column there, our proposed final budget. And then the final column is the variance. And that's really the difference between the amended budget and the proposed budget. So I'd like to speak a little bit to those variances and then ask or answer any questions that are asked. So the first item that you see, the local resources there, we have a variance from what we had originally projected of about $580,000. The vast majority of that was that we had a decrease in the amount of money that we collect for all of our SAC, our early childhood type programs. Those are typically revenue generating programs, but because of COVID, we had to shut those down. We also had some decreases to our taxable value from what we had originally budgeted. So that's pretty much reflected there in that decrease of $580,000. We did have an increase of about $144,000, as you can see in the instruction. That's a combination of a couple things, but as you'll recall, you know, a part of that certainly that is increasing it is that we had negotiated an increase with the ABA for Top Step. So that was the vast majority of that. We did also have some cuts that came in as well, but that netted to the $144,000 that you see there. Additionally, kind of skipping down a little bit to some of the bigger ticket items in terms of the variance, you can see in our operations and maintenance, we saved about $339,000 off of what we thought we were going to spend. A big piece of that is, you know, during the shutdown, we did have our custodians and our maintenance folks come in and continue to work. They were continued to be paid, but we didn't have as much overtime for sure. We also had some savings to our utilities in terms of the heating cost and the electricity costs that we would normally have in our buildings. We were able to avoid that, obviously, by keeping our buildings shut down, or vast portions of the buildings shut down. And then the same with below that, the transportation, you can see a $219,000 increase, or a decrease, I apologize. And that is largely related to the fact that the buses were delivering food, but they weren't making runs 2 and 3 times a day on the longer runs that they make to pick up the students. So we had a significant decrease in the amount of diesel fuel that we spent there. Also some utility and repair savings, because obviously the buses aren't running as much, less repairs. So that brought us down to a savings of roughly $672,000. Now, again, going back to the top to the revenues, you can see our revenues decreased by almost $600,000. And that's really what brought us down to that revenue over expenditure change of about $55,000 between the amended budget that we passed back in February to the final budget that we passed, or we're asking you to pass, we're proposing tonight that you pass. And so that's where we project to end the year. I would be happy to, again, we touched on this earlier, but I want to focus again on the 3.44%. You can see we're losing roughly $3.1 million this year. Some big ticket items that are coming in to help us next year are certainly the enhancement millage, but again, we still are in a structural deficit, and we're going to have to address that as we talked about earlier. But are there any questions I can answer for you on the general fund 2019-20 final budget that we're proposing the board pass tonight?
Any questions from the board? Seeing none. Is there a motion to?
And John, I'll just say for those other funds, they are also in your board packet. If you would like me to answer any questions on those, I would be happy to do that. But if there are no further questions on those, I would propose that the board approve the budgets as.
Yeah, we'll go to a vote.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget amendments as presented?
I'll move.
Motion by Ms. DeWitt. Is there a second?
I'll support.
Supported by Ms. Hedershot. Vote by roll.
Can I have a comment? Trustee Middlestate.
Go ahead.
Under the international fund budget, I know we approved to move 630,000 into the general fund, but I just want to note just the amount of money that we received last year that we perhaps may not receive next year. We received over $1 million in revenue. And one of the dangers of transferring those funds to general fund instead of using them for other things, somehow now your budget's dependent on that money. So we're in a circumstance now that if that isn't coming in, instead of spending that 600,000 or 500,000 on textbooks or other things, we're depending on that to run our operations. So I just wanted to note that that's nothing to do with this motion exactly, but going forward, that's a lot of funds that, you know, that program brought in, and now we're kind of dependent on it based on how we're approving the budget. That was just my note. That's it.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on that? Seeing none, Ms. Burkmeyer, vote by roll.
Ms. Acquaviti Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. DeRue,
Yep.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
Burkmeyer, yes.
All right. Proposal passed. Now we'll move to the budget approval for 2020, 2021. Mr. Rathbun?
Yes, so again, the board has that before you. These are the numbers that we talked about during our presentation at the start of this meeting, during the budget hearing. There are no changes from what we discussed with regards to the general fund. You know, I would be happy to take any questions that we have on the general fund. The other funds that we discussed, the special revenue funds, the debt fund, and the school food service funds are all also in the board packet. And we would also recommend that the board take up those budgets and approve those. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in regards to the 2020-21 budgets.
I have a comment.
Mr. Middlestat?
I know these budgets, when we approve them in June, are based on a lot of estimates and projections.
Yep.
But one of the important things on when you set this budget is basically you're setting the policy for what the board expects the administration to do in the next year. Now, the numbers may change a bit, but I think the philosophy here is that we're spending in the budget before us, we're spending $1.5 million more in expenditures than we're receiving. And you know, Todd talked in the beginning about we need to cut that money, but I think when we approve this budget, we should be approving the budget to be a no increase in fund equity. We should be having our expenditures nearly where the revenue's at. If we reduce the expenditures by 0.975, we would come up with about $70,000 to the plus, and then we send the administration off to meet that budget. But to vote on as a board policy that we expect that the budget is going to be $1.5 million under revenue at this point, I don't think is a wise thing to do. I think we should set our target such that we're giving the administration and the community a policy that says we expect to not spend more money than we receive next year. And that's what we need to approve. So I have a difficult time, and I know the finance reviewed all this and the numbers all shake out, but I would reduce all those expenditures by 0.975 to get us slightly under our revenue and make that our policy going forward rather than approve a budget and then talk about it all summer. I think we need to set the bar high in terms of what our expectations are, rather than saying, hey, these are estimates. We need to cut the 1.5. If we set the budget that says we will cut the 1.5. So that's my comment, because I'm gonna, just to be honest, I can't approve something that says I'm already 1.6 million 1.6 million under the target, or 1.6% under the state target, and you're asking me to approve something that puts me now 5% below. At a minimum, we should be not increasing our deficit or our fund equity. It's just a fundamental premise that you should be following. So that's my objection to how this is coming out. I would make the motion that we spend 0.975 of the expenditures shown here, such that we have about a $70,000 balance, and then go off through the summer and take those challenges that come before us. But to sit here and say, I'm going to approve the board as a whole in a $60 million operation to accept a 1.5 million deficit to put me a boiler away from going into a deficit is not, I don't think is a prudent. That's just my opinion on this.
Well,
Think, go ahead, Mr. Woodside. He's got to can you unmute him? You're not.
My back?
There you go. You're back.
No, I understand what Steve's saying, and he's making some valid points, and I think Todd would agree, and Todd, you could chime in if you'd like. But what you have before you is the budget for the 2021 school year that we have to complete and provide to the state by July 1st as required. We know that we're going to have to make adjustments to it because the state has not provided us what our revenue is, for next school year. And we're likely not going to find out what that revenue is till probably August. And we know, like last year, we also did not get our revenue till late August. So we know we're going to have to make, a budget adjustment very soon after.
I understand, but my other comment is we're already below the state standard. So we're going to end up going to Lansing. And how are you going to explain that the 2021 budget you approved took you another 3.2% below? We can very easily just approve numbers that are to put us there tonight by multiplying that times 0.975. It gives you the right numbers. We could approve that tonight.
Yeah, I would just, Steve, you're spot on. I agree with you that we should not be approving a deficit budget that drives us down to almost zero fund balance and gives us very little room to, deal with items like you're talking about, one bad boiler or, one bad turn, on a school bus, and, replacing the school bus is about the remainder of our fund balance. So I get what you're talking about. I understand exactly what you're saying. We did talk about that during the finance committee. And as Leonard said, there's still so many outstanding items of information with respect to this budget that what we talked about is we are developing right now. We have some, we're continuing to develop more and more cuts, and we are targeting, cuts of upward of $3-4 million that we would have available to immediately implement if we have to, in light of additional cuts that we have to the foundation. So, I understand what you're saying, that multiplying this by 0.975 gets us back to, kind of break even. But to be quite frank with you, I think we're going to have to make even deeper cuts than that, based on what the foundation, cuts to the foundation. And, if our estimates are not perfect in terms of the, number of students that we're going to lose. And so our goal is right now, Steve, is to develop that cut list and be able to quickly, as soon as we have the information from the governor or any other information that we get, come back and amend the budget. And we may end up amending the budget even prior to the start of school. That would be my hope, is that we have a amended budget even before the start of school.
I just think it tells the public, I know we're talking about, we're going to cut, we're going to do that, but I think it just doesn't send a right message to the public that we're going to spend right down to zero. And I know all the numbers are estimates. I know.
I don't think that's the I get what you're saying, Steve, but that's correct, Steve. And that wasn't we talked long, obviously, at the finance committee meeting about this. And there's a lot of different variables, as you know.
Yep.
And looking at those cuts that are out there, and I mean, it's definitely something that's going to change. And until we have a better list of what we can cut and a better idea of what the state's going to come out with, you know, we're looking at a long-term planning. We're also going to try not to, there's a theories, I see your theory of trying to get back to right away, but I don't think there's going to be many districts unlike us in this, and we got to have kind of a maybe a little bit longer term approach to getting back to what you're talking about, to above the 5% and beyond.
Well, the philosophy is, and that's something that takes a while to figure out, is that the cuts you do today are makes less cuts down the road. So if you think I really need 2 million, but it's going to take 1.2, it's going to end up being 2.5, because if you wait, if you're going to cut, take the heat, take the pressure at one time. If you drag this thing off in the long term, we've been there before and done that. I'm telling you, it'll be a disaster. So you need to be able to step forward and make those tough decisions and not delay them, because that's just how the budget finance works on the boards. If you wait a year, you double your cuts in terms of what you were expecting to do. So I'm just giving you my background experience on doing this stuff, is that you should be laying a line in the sand saying that we're not going to spend more as the board. And I'm just reiterating what I said, but it's just a basic philosophy that the biggest board policy is setting budget. And what you're doing is you're setting the policy saying, I'm going to be 1.5 in the hole, and trust me, I'm going to fix it. I think you just need to do it.
Well,
That's
can I say, Mr. Drew?
Marie?
I think that was the entire premise
Yes.
of the Finance Committee meeting. We were assured that by the end of July, we would have a comprehensive list and would have things put in motion, which would make the members of the committee that reviewed the budget comfortable with putting in the budget that we are as of July the 1st. And I believe that was, I'm speaking for Mr. Drew and Mr. Green, but that was really the underlying agreement of moving this forward, was that these cuts would be addressed immediately and by the end of July, so that we would really start to look at what we could do immediately and what would have to be more long range.
I just reiterate my point. This is the only chance as a board to set your target on what you want to do. That's my point.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Green.
I would actually side with Mr. Middlestat here. I know we did talk at length at the Finance Committee. I'm not thrilled either, Mr. Middlestat, about approving a budget and setting ourselves up for a failure before we even start. So I agree. I think what starts to grow and wear on me is that now we paint ourselves into a corner, because we have to approve this by July 1st. This is something that should have been done and brought to this board back in May, so that perhaps we could have had a better opportunity to address concerns such as Mr. Middlestat's.
Well, to me, it's pretty easy. Just put on the form the right number and approve it. Put 61, 705.
Yeah, I don't think there's much discussion for what Mr. Middletat. And we had a Finance Committee meeting, Mr. Green, and we at length, and if I remember, that's what we all decided was the 1.5 cuts is what we're looking at for sure. And then we were going to try to get some more information, and then preserve what was talked about was preserving as many. We understand that the way to cut money is going to be jobs. I mean, there's no secret to that. When Mr. Ratbun said it earlier, 85 to 90% of your budget is people. So we were going to try to preserve as many jobs and not go drastic until we had to. And if the things come true, I mean, everybody's throwing around we've heard anywhere from a $300 cut to a $1,000 cut. There's a lot of people that think they know, they have friends, they have this, they have that. Nobody knows yet. And, we're hoping that the feds will come in with some money. But as far as what we talked about at finance and we talked about it at length, and this is where we're at. And I get what Mr. Middlestad's saying, and yeah, great. Throw 5% on there, and get it back to 5 in 1 year. But
No. My point is that we won't have to do the whole 2 million. I understand that there's going to be a lot of variables, but 1.5 million cut, we're still underneath the state. 1.5 million cut's not going to get us. We're not going to overcut with 1.5. We're already 1.5 below 5. So it's
what at the finance committee, what Mr. Rathbun said was 1.5 is the minimum we have to cut. Right now, minimum, we can't, no matter what happens, we're cutting 1.5. More likely, he informed us, it's going to be bigger. And we are looking at all that, and we are definitely going to have multiple finance committee meetings, and probably would be better, judging by this conversation, is a working meeting of all of us to really, once we have some solid numbers, to try to see where the board's at. And when you talk, board policy or board, theory of how fast do we want to get back to right? So.
Yeah, the state's going to help us on that if we don't help ourselves.
The state's going to have a lot of districts to help, but yes. So, I guess, is there a motion?
John, can I interrupt? Sorry. I think I'm kind of in the middle of everybody who spoke here. I like Steve's thought process on how he goes about that. And honestly, if this were a typical year, I would probably be 100% on board with that. I feel like there are just so many balls in the air that you're going to be estimating on estimates to try and, figure out where you're making cuts or we don't know. Our enrollment's messed up because people aren't enrolling at the normal rate. We don't know what our funding is going to be. I mean, there's so many different things. We don't know, other forms of education that platforms that we have to work with and try and incorporate. But, in this environment, the way I understood this budget was, it's kind of where we are at this moment, which is still very out in left field. And hopefully, at our next meeting, we'll already be able to really rectify that much more. My problem with making grave cuts immediately off the bat is, these are people's livelihoods, and overcutting salaries and jobs, we can come back and say, whoops, we didn't need to cut this position, but that person might have already moved on or had to make life changes, to better for themselves. And I really want to avoid that as best we can. May or may not be possible, but so in this instance, I'm okay with this scenario. Like I said, had it not had so many things up in the air, I would probably be right with you. That's just my opinion.
No, it's school finance. You have to do your projections and to do these things right. You need to make assumptions and move forward. We're already deep in the hole. We're not going to make too many cuts because we're not going to possibly get over 1.5 to 2 million in 1 year. It's going to be a long-term process. But like I mentioned, the longer you wait, the more cuts you're going to make. And it's going to be a combination of jobs, salaries, lots of different things. So it's a matter of, everything's always up, and it's always been enrollment. It's always been what the state aid's going to be. It's going to be what the Fed impact aids is. Those variables are always out there. So on the budget that Todd's presented, assuming the same amount of money and only 100 kids down, that's a pretty conservative estimate. So I disagree that we can't set a budget that's $1.5 million, that we don't spend more than revenue than we do in expenditures. It's pretty easy to make that motion, so.
I would, John, if I can jump in, Steve, I understand what you're saying. My concern about just slashing everything, multiplying it by 9.975, I think that creates honestly more of a problem, because now I'm kind of tied to those functional areas, and I might not just be able to make the cuts in that functional area. So I understand what you're saying. Again, we are working very diligently right now to come up with the cuts that we need to make. And Lisa, you're exactly right. We had that discussion with Mr. Green and Mr. Drew and Marie at the meeting to say that, we don't want to jump the shark on making cuts and laying people off and creating panic when we don't know what's going to happen. In fact, today we saw some news that came out that said, the Senate is trying to put together, $800 per kid coming back. So, this thing is more turbulent than it usually is, I think. And we are trying to be as nimble as we can by creating the cuts, sharing the cuts with the Finance Committee, and being very transparent with the board and through the Finance Committee. And then we will make those hard decisions, Steve. I know that it's situation.
If we're going to wait till we have all the parameters, we're not going to get.
We're not. We can't do that. But we're already making the cuts right now. We just have to look at how deep we're going to go with those cuts.
All right. Is there a motion to accept the proposed 2020-2021 budget as presented? Awesome. All right.
Well, Mr. Drew, I don't think we have a choice. Don't we have to approve this?
Well, yeah. So, unless we, I guess, what's today's date?
It has to be approved by the 1st, right?
Correct. So, we got a couple days. We'll be back at it. So no one wants to make that motion?
So can I, just for clarification purposes, if we were to move forward with this particular motion, we will be back within a month making amendments to it.
Without a doubt. I think I misunderstood Steve. So I whatever, lost in translation or something. So you're basically just stating. For some reason, I was thinking you were saying get back to close to 5% 1 year. You're saying just
break even.
Take out the 1.5 million right now. Just take it off every line item. Just take off that you said 0.97% and times it by that and call it a day.
It's all an estimate. But the bottom line numbers gives us our policy. Is my point.
I get what you're saying. So you're I get what you're saying. All right. For some reason I was.
You were thinking he wanted a 5%.
For some reason I was thinking he wanted to put into place, show on here that we're going to cut and get us back to 5%. I was like, whoa.
No, the numbers I had get us a plus 72,000 when I apply that factor. Instead of a 1.5 under a 70,000 plus.
John?
I think the board by not,
What if I just wanted to throw something out there, Mr. Witt, and then I apologize, but if we got to come back and we have to amend it anyway, if we just do what Mr. Middlestat's asking, and just cut that and go down to make it even Steven, then Todd, or Mr. Rathbun, if you run into issues on a specific line item that you're not able to cut in that area, then you'll just have to obviously bring that to finance and back to the board and say, this is why I couldn't do it and I cut more out of this area. But for ease of tonight and to pass it, or not to pass it, but to get a budget
The ball rolling.
rolling, I think that what Mr. Middlestat says, it does make sense.
Yes, it does.
Especially with what you told us that we have to cut it no matter what.
Right.
I was misunderstanding him, and he makes a lot of sense. So
I can make a motion to give you the number I came up with.
why don't you do that?
Well,
Todd,
Yes.
you guys could fill in I can give you the total appropriated number, and if you guys want to fill in the detail on the breakdown to meet that.
yeah, I think this is Leonard. You know, what the board has, I understand what you're saying, Stephen, if that's how we wanted, how to make those changes, that's fine. But what you have before you, as we discussed, as Todd had said, from finance, we know that we have to cut the 1.5 million.
Correct.
Period. So I think you're just saying it, I think we're both saying it, but Steve, we're both saying it the same way. I mean,
Exactly.
if we want to show the budget as you're saying, we could do that, but what the board has before them is, you know, there is going to be, you know, obviously an amended budget before the school year that has to reduce that by $1.5 million. So if you want to make the change, we're saying the same thing, just a different way.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would just add in, I think we're going to get to the same spot ultimately, Steve. I understand your position that as a policy, you don't want to do this. But, you know, I also want to add that these numbers are not just a crapshoot. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions that go into it, but there's also hours and hours and hours of work. And, you know, we're looking at all of our legal obligations in terms of contract. And, you know, when we created the structural deficit that we have, you know, with the contracts that we approved and so forth, you know, those are reflected in here, and we can't just arbitrarily decrease those, you know,
I'm just
couple percentage points. So I just want to make that point.
2.5 for each is what will break it.
I'm sorry?
It's a 2.5% decrease for each line item.
So I think I think as a policy we can approve that, and with the contracts that were awarded out there, I mean, I know Macomb County did the same thing. They offered 3% raises to some groups, and then as a board policy, they said they're not going to do more than 2%, but they had to cut in other areas. So, you know, you're going to come back with another amendment to this, but to Steve's point, to not pass a budget that has a deficit spending, he makes a good point. So if we can do that, I think we probably have support here tonight, and we can pass this. And it, like you said, as Ms. Hedershot says, get the ball rolling. So overall, if we just took the proposed original budget for 2020-21 and decreased each line item by 2.5%, that would be the proposal that Steve is making. Correct, Steve?
Yes.
So
Make a motion, Steve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the budget, 2021 budget with the total available to appropriate as presented, $66,587,249. The total appropriated would come out to be 2.5% below, which I calculate as being $61,722,482. That would leave a positive fund balance of 72,588, or revenue over expenditures of 72,588. Leave us with a fund equity of 1,695,932.
I'll trust your math, Steve, and support you.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the proposal? Proposed budget, I should say. All right. Ms. Burkmeyer, vote by roll.
My only caveat, let's say those are the numbers I calculated, but to have the administration verify, but it is 2.5%.
My support still stands for 2.5% across the board.
to have the district finance go over the numbers, solidify the numbers.
Correct, to reduce every line
vote
item
by-
by 2.5%.
So
Yep.
to clarify that, so that would mean every single, transportation has to find 2.5% cuts every single.
Yeah.
What that means is that this gives us the boilerplate to go forward.
Yeah.
Administration and the finance and the board can adjust those numbers plus or minus, as we always do. Just sets the target going forward.
Okay.
Todd needs to come up with the total. He might be able to find 5 in transportation, but only 1 in food service, or whatever it
Okay.
might be, as long as we get to the bottom.
Amending it, but it's setting that we're not going to pass a deficit budget.
Okay.
And then instead of having committee meetings,
I lost you there. What'd you say?
should be having,
What's that?
I believe we should have working board meetings over a committee meeting in this regard.
Yes. Oh, yes. We're going to, I talked to Mr. Woodside about it last week, about the fact that, especially with what's coming up with curriculum, with what's coming up with finance, with everything, we're going to have some working meetings, and hopefully we're able to get in person, so we don't have this. I don't know about you guys, but my computer is, I'm losing every other word sometimes. So, but we'll vote by rule.
Can I ask one more question, Jan? Just for Mr. Rathburn and Mr. Woodside, do you guys agree with this? I mean, you guys were in the committee meeting. You came out and supported the budget that was proposed. Now we're amending it. Do you guys agree with this?
I'm sorry, I'm poor connection.
Hear him. He was asking if Mr. Woodside and Mr. Rathbun agree with this, that they were in the finance committee meeting, and asking their opinion, if they support this.
A question from Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, mine's not coming in, so I couldn't totally, but yes, we did, I didn't totally get the question, but we did talk about it at finance, what Steve's proposed. Am I still, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay, what Steve proposing is we're basically saying the same thing, Mike. We know that the budget that the board has before them, as Todd had discussed earlier, there will be a $1.5 million reduction in it before, and as Todd said, before the school year would start. And it's difficult to develop a budget when you do not know what your revenue is at this time. And then, as Todd also indicated, it's just you don't want to, obviously you don't want to be in a position where you're going to cut more than necessary. You don't want to create anxiety, for those that are going to be impacted. I think Lisa kind of said that, but you don't want to create the anxiety for people.
That's I guess my issue with the committee that looked at this. You guys came out in support of what was on here, and now are you changing your mind?
We're not changing our mind, because we all agreed 100% that we have to cut 1.5 million. That has to be done. Where it comes from, Todd and Leonard are going to have to go through.
I think Mr. Redman has some serious concerns about that.
Mike, I think I
Hey,
understand.
Todd, can you
Yeah,
hear? Because mine, it's not coming across. I cannot hear what Mike is asking.
I think I understand his question, so I'll try and restate it. Mike's asking, we're in a committee meeting. We came back with this particular budget, and now we're changing the budget. And do I have concerns? I do have some concern, that we're going to be able to abide by the exact line items that are being passed tonight. But as Steve said, and I agree with, if we have to make a cut somewhere else or make it it's not going to be exactly as the board is approving it tonight. We're going to have to make cuts in different areas, because a 2.5% cut to the instruction is another $1 million that we would need to cut out of instruction, and we just can't do that. So we're going to have to find other areas that we're going to have to make those cuts. So I guess, again, Leonard said it, I agree. We're all in agreement that before the school year starts, we have to cut 1.5 million or more. And I want to be or more, because if we truly have some foundational cuts that come from the governor, it's going to be a lot more than 1.5. It could be more like $3 million that we need to cut. So again, we all know that we need to cut. I think it's just the form and the way we're doing it tonight. Mr. Middlestat wants to set some policy here tonight and say, we're not going to pass deficit budget. So I understand that, but we will also come back to you very soon with an amended budget, because we know that we just can't make flat 2.5% cuts across the board.
So we're either going to, so I guess I'll explain it another way. We're either doing, so we're going to be doing the 1.5 million reduction in this budget immediately.
Yes.
Before we provide it to the state, instead of waiting a month and doing it then.
Yep.
You agree, Todd? That's what we're saying here.
Yes.
That's what we agreed on in finance.
And that's what I wanted to make the point, that
Yes.
that the finance committee is not changing their mind or changing the outlook. We all agreed at the finance committee, we're cutting 1.5. Where it's coming from, we didn't really know. So even if we pass the budget as it stood, the proposal that Todd brought tonight, that we brought the finance committee, it's still not knowing where the cuts are coming from. So now all we're saying is to make it easy and to not pass a deficit spending budget proposal, we'll take 2.5% off for ease of tonight off each line item. And Leonard and Todd are going to go back and they're going to find out where they can make the cuts, because we had to anyway, and we're going to be done with it. But at least we didn't, as a board, have it in here that we passed deficit spending. Mr. Middlestat's idea or theory there is a good one. I think it's right and just, and it's what we need to do. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
I guess my only comment is if Mr. Woodside and Mr. Aspern feels it's not right, I guess.
Steve, I'm comfortable with your approach. I like the fact that the board is taking a stance here that they're not going to engage in deficit spending. You're not going to get any fight from any business manager on that. So I'm not opposed at all. Leonard said it well. It's a matter of timing, and we will make it work.
Yep. Okay.
So John, you've got a motion.
I know.
We got to vote on the motion.
I know. I got Anita in here working on my internet because it's going in and out. But vote by roll. Ms. Burkmeyer.
This motion was Steve's motion to approve the budget with a 2.5% decrease to each line item.
Correct.
Expenditure.
Correct.
Of expenditures, yes. Okay. Ms. Akavetti Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. DeRue,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses.
Yes.
Was that, I think I heard it. Did anyone else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And Burkmeyer, yes.
Mike's on an AT&T phone.
Must not be employee benefits over there. All right. Motion, budget proposal passes. Now we'll go into the resolution, the state aid note for cash flow borrowing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Before the board tonight is a resolution for the state aid note borrowing. As many of you are likely aware, the state does not provide a payment in the month of September. And so oftentimes we have a cash flow issue. This allows us to address that cash flow issue. And so before you this evening, we're proposing to borrow $6.5 million so that we can meet our cash flow requirements. And then we will pay this back over a series of payments that go back to the state of Michigan.
Okay.
Are there any questions I can answer?
I just one comment is that this is a symptom of not having enough fund equity to cover that September payment. And my concern, as always with this, is that I think we borrowed, if I look at the cash flow analysis, right around 3.5 million last year. And now we're up to 6.5 million. So again, it's a symptom of how we moved from a 10% fund equity down to nearly zero within 2 years. Now we have to borrow almost twice as much to meet payroll in September. So it's not I'm just relating it as not just because the state doesn't give us a payment in September. It's because I don't have enough fund equity in the bank to cover it. So I got to borrow the money. Like I said, we're almost doubling the amount of money we're borrowing this time to cover it. So again, it all relates into that in 2 years, we went from 10% almost to zero. And now you don't have any money to cover yourself, so you have to borrow more money. So it's a negative ramification of overspending the fund equity that causes us to have to borrow so much.
Yep, that is absolutely accurate. Yep.
Okay. Is there any other? Yeah, correct. Has there been a year that we didn't have to borrow in the last 10 years?
Yeah, if your fund equity, usually it's when your fund equity is 15% plus, you have a
correct
good chance you're not going to borrow.
And what I said is in the last 10 years, has there been a year that we haven't borrowed?
I'd have to look, but probably I would have to look the last 10, 15 for sure.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Is there a motion to approve the resolution for the 2020-2021 school year as presented?
I'll make the motion.
By Ms. Hedershot, second by Mr. Moses. Vote by roll.
Zachavari Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. DeRue,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat,
No.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
and Burkmeyer, yes.
Does anybody know, is he reconnecting?
I think he's at the middle school. Why don't we give him a second to see if he gets back on?
Is he here?
And you guys picked up my connection.
And Mr. Moses sounds like E.T. Sorry.
At least I'm still here.
You know, you're right, he does.
All of a sudden I lost everybody.
No, I'm still here, Steve. I just didn't want you to see me run into the fridge.
Okay. I'll have to use that strategy.
I'm getting ice cream. Don't think otherwise.
What kind?
It is a Haagen-Dazs chocolate almond something or another I got from Sam's the other day.
Oh.
You know we're being recorded, right?
Yep. I'm used to it. I spent half my life being recorded.
Patrick, do you deliver?
Yes, but you cannot afford the charge.
Try me.
Maybe we can hold the board meeting outside with everybody at their own table 6 feet apart with frozen yogurt delivered.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, there we go.
I'm calling Tim. See where we're
Yeah,
at.
does it take this long?
Hi, you gonna be able to get us back on?
All right.
Oh, there he is.
Somebody got me for making fun of Mike. So, all right. Did it pass?
Yes, it passed.
All right. So now,
Everyone is getting ice cream but you.
dang it. No swirly top for me. All right.
No, we were going to CC's Dairy Bar.
Woo, I'm in. Look at me. Personnel. Miss Laura? Oh, someone's got to unmute her. I just did it.
Evening.
Good evening.
Okay. Tonight, I bring to you the recommendation to hire Major Jeffrey Herman for the vacant senior STASI instructor for our JROTC program. Major Herman is retired from the Air Force and has spent 17 years as a working in JROTC in high school, teaching this doing this position in 2 separate high schools. Prior to that, as he finished his military career, he worked with the JROTC at University of Michigan, working with the scholarship recipients there, as well as conducting inspections for JROTC. He's very well versed in every aspect of this program, and I think he'll be a great addition to our team.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Obviously, I think it needs to be said that as we've been talking about not spending and money and so forth, that this needs to be made aware to the community that we do get reimbursement from the federal government for this particular position, that it's not completely out of our budget.
Yeah, Laura, isn't it half their pay is paid by the Air Force?
Yes, the Air Force sets their pay, and then it is a 50-50 partnership in paying that pay. The Air Force reimburses the district 50% of the pay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the new hire as presented.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Birkmeyer. Any discussion on the new hire?
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment that I really appreciate that we got a person that's very experienced, not just as a Air Force person, but also as an instructor. I think that's going to be really going to supplement Master Sergeant Quintano's efforts in the last year. And I think this looks very, from just looking at the resume and his background, I'm very encouraged and looking forward to meeting the gentleman.
Yes. Any other discussion? Seeing none, vote by roll.
Ms. Akavetti Hendershot,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
Birkmeyer, yes.
Can I make one
All
more?
right.
Comment?
What's that?
Can I make one more comment? Can Laura, can you make sure that both this gentleman and the Senior Master Sergeant, that we get contracts before them such that the board can approve? Because basically, they're the only individuals that aren't represented in the district. So based on past issues we've had, I want to make sure that we have contracts that they've signed and we've agreed to. Not that it's a big issue. I just want to make sure we have that documentation in place. If you could, please. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Go into union communication. I don't know. Anita, have they?
There's one.
Pam?
I just unmuted Pam, so she should be able to speak now.
Okay. Ms. Perchup?
Hi there.
Hey, how you doing?
Good evening, everybody. As many of you know, my name is Pam Percha, and I am president of the Anchor Bay Para Association. And tonight I'd like to introduce our new 2020-2022 board members. I'm going to be continuing the president role along with Deb Zentek, our vice president. And I'd like to welcome Kathy Hazelton, our secretary, and Cindy Majewski as our new treasurer. Each building has a building rep, and they are as follows. High school is Laura Barbier. Middle school south is Kathy Hazelton. Middle school north, Julie Siemens. Ashley Elementary, Roxanne Bing. Great Oaks Elementary would be Jody Quigley. Lighthouse, Carol Kruzmanowski. Lottie would be Marianne Carlson. McCons is Leslie Messina. Naldra would be Julie Sarzinski. And at Sugarbush is Debbie Fatu. Mr. Woodside, I would really like to thank you for your kind words tonight. It was great that we could all come together, as like you said, and speaking on behalf of the paras, we were glad to be able to assist making the lunches, helping the teachers, parents, students, whatever needed to be done. I'd also have some happy news. I'd like to announce that we have 5 women that are going to be retiring this year. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Annette Jagoda, Linda Maggio, Sue Kalo, Susie Hibbs and Nancy LaPensi. These are amazing women, and it's going to be hard to replace them, very much so. A few of them actually trained me when I first started as a lunch aide. So congratulations to all you ladies. And finally, I would like to thank Central Administration for all their communication during these uncharted times with the para-union. Todd Rathbun and I had many conversations, and the one thing that he made sure of right from the start was to keep all Anchor Bay employees safe along with their students. To have that sincere concern throughout this pandemic and open communication to come up with the best solutions that we could is something I truly do appreciate, and I am very, very grateful for. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me speak tonight, and I hope you all have a very good evening.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Very nice.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other union communication? Okay. Go to.
Oh, hold on, there's someone here, so 1 second.
Oh.
Jamie Petron wants to speak, so give me a second to find her.
Oh, I got her right here. If I can unmute her, I'll unmute her. All right, she's unmuted. Miss Petron?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
First of all, I just had a chuckle with the technical difficulties because any teacher who has experienced remote learning, we know that that is something that happens quite often. I just wanted to say thank goodness for the enhancement millage, and I would like to thank the board again for being the first in Macomb County to making the resolution to get that on the ballot. And to everyone who supported that, I think right now we'd be in a much worse position than we kind of already are. So I appreciate that. Also, Anchor Bay isn't unique to these this budget situation. I think that this is going to affect the whole state. And I think right now, more than ever, people need to be very vocal. They need to be writing their legislatures. They need to be getting on board and advocating for public schools. Also, after this meeting, I know my phone is already blowing up as we speak. This is going to be a really hard time for my members. So I think compassion and communication right now is very important through the district. And we look forward to having a seat at the table with these discussions as we move forward. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Any other union communications, Mr. Sizemore?
I don't see anybody else in the chat, so I think
okay.
We're good.
We'll go to strategic plan updates. I think I stole Mr. Woodside's computer, so.
No, this will be me.
Oh, all right.
I'm just sharing my screen really fast. So can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. So as we did last year around in the August timeframe, we kind of laid out again what we had accomplished with the strategic plan from the year prior. While of course some of our time fell short this year, we still did accomplish quite a lot towards our strategic plan and our 4 goal areas. So just wanted to take this quick opportunity to remind everybody that the process began back in October of 2016, and the strategic plan is really your roadmap. It follows your mission and vision and helps set the goals for the district and the decision making in the district when we have solid goals that we work towards. The 4 goal areas are technology, curriculum, culture, and communication. And just to remind everybody, there's subgroups under each of those, and then there are strategies, separate strategies under each one as well. The full plan, the detailed write-up can be seen with lots of different information on each goal area and each strategy, but tonight I'm just going to kind of give a high-level overview. So again, the curriculum goals, there were 3 different ones. One was continuous review of the pre-K through 12th grade to ensure vertical and horizontal alignment. implementation of courses that develop and encourage intellectual tenacity to prepare our students for real-world opportunities, and to continuously revise and review the district's multi-tiered support systems available for all students. So some of the highlights of our accomplishments this year is our elementary PLCs in the past had met 3 times last year. This year they expanded to also include some district PD time. Of course, we got closed before some of our additional PD time, but that was on the docket to take place. Our secondary PLCs, they are still conducted monthly, and they also took place during district PD time. This year, our professional development, there was several days that were all district teachers came together. At the start of the year, we did do a major kickoff of Schoology. I'll talk more about this later, but just to remind everybody, we were moving towards Schoology. That is the countywide system, learning management system, and our secondary teachers, a lot of our teachers were using it, but our secondary teachers had more training. So when we talk about the yeoman's job of what took place over the last 3 months, definitely our elementary teachers, you know, had to learn fast and furious because they did not have as much training time before the school closure. We also had speakers on generational differences, diversity and inclusion, and mindfulness. Kind of a running theme at secondary is disciplinary literacy, and at elementary, they are continuing their work in reading essentials. This next slide shows a lot of the same strategies that we were working on last year, continuing Project Lead the Way, STEM activities, the MTSS teams meeting every other week to discuss student progress. Again, that's really that piece of making sure that no kid falls through the cracks. Math enrichment. Our academic coach at the high school has been expanded to also serve middle schools. We still have math tutoring at the secondary level. The next goal area is technology, and we have 3 main goals there, which is incorporating technology into training. Again, that became oh so important over the last 3 months. The integration of technology driven by curriculum and the increase in instructional availability of technology equipment, which this evening we're also going to talk about that. So just to expand in the technology area, you know, we hired our technology coach, and she is on a rotating schedule. It's been very good. She basically has an online system for the teachers to schedule their time, ask their questions, and she can still go out and meet with them. We did get some of the district PD time to talk about Performance Matters and Schoology. Remember, Performance Matters is our data analysis system, so that really helps us monitor all the way down to the classroom and individual students. We expanded our Tech Tip Tuesdays. I don't think we missed too many of them, except for one day when I sent it on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday. But those, we also kept a running resource page so that they could go back and utilize those at any time. We did produce over 80 recorded resources for teachers so that they can access them 24/7. We continue having one-on-one PLC staff meetings and small group trainings. And I'm really excited to share that we already have 14 virtual Schoology trainings scheduled for August. The dates and the times and the Zoom links have already been released to the teachers. These are obviously optional, but once we conduct them, the teachers can access them at any point in time. We also expanded our training to our support staff. We did a survey of our support staff to find out what needs they have. Office 365, PowerPoint, Excel, we conducted trainings there. As per usual, we re-image all teacher and student computers every summer. We did get an early jump on that, so that helps for Tim and his support staff. Last fall or late summer, we installed the wireless network. Tonight, you're gonna see that we're making a recommendation to purchase additional Chromebooks. At the last board meeting, you approved the server upgrade, so that'll be going in. And I do wanna just share that 84% of the teaching staff that were signed into the Schoology course completed it fully. And you might be saying, well, 84% doesn't sound, as high as I expected. Maybe it would be 90 or 100, but you do have to remember that we did have about 10% of our teachers already using Schoology. So they may not have needed that basic course that we set up for everybody. The next one is our communication goals. Obviously, we continue to work on our communication within our community, within our buildings, and then also becoming, having a strong presence, brand and image of Anchor-based school district. Some of the things that continued in the communication area are monthly digital newsletters, press releases. We've done more than 30 since the start of school. We monitor when we are printed in the paper, so we're definitely getting a better presence in our local newspapers. Increase in social media presence. We still have growth on our Twitter, Facebook, and our social media, Instagram. We have daily posts. We keep it very fresh, lots of pictures, and we're getting a lot of good feedback there, lots of good questions, and it's really been working well. We still do a community newsletter. We'll have another one coming up here. We are going to focus on our graduates and make sure that we share that out. We've expanded some of our marketing materials, postcards, lawn signs, decals. Again, just making sure we're always using a consistent logo and making sure things look consistent and really showcase Anchor Bay well. We continue to strengthen our nonprofit partnerships through our Friday flyers. That's what we do on social media, and we're able to help our churches and our libraries and some of our nonprofits in the area. We do very frequent staff emails. I know some people are probably tired of getting them from me, especially on Tech Tip Tuesdays, but I'm going to share later a survey we did, and we did get a lot of positive comments that people are reading them and it's helpful. We continue with some radio advertising. We did have to cancel our realtor breakfast. It was scheduled and invites have gone out, but we became closed, so that happened as well. And because we weren't able to do our readiness night for our kindergartners, we were able to do registration, but not readiness night. We did some unique videos and some individual messages from our principals, and those are all posted on our web pages. The next area is the culture goal, and that is to foster a welcoming atmosphere, develop and enhance programs that support a sense of district pride, and implement learning communities to support. And as you saw in my previous few slides, a lot of what happens in curriculum and communication really falls into the same place of our cultures, just trying to keep everybody on the same page, making sure we're getting information out as timely as possible. We did implement an online registration option. It's not, we still have steps to go where we could do everything fully online and remote and have it accessed directly into our system. But given the nature of where we're at right now with school closures, we did have to come up with an online option. As you saw earlier tonight, we did home visits to our incoming kindergarten families. And again, that was with a big help of our school buses as well. It was really fun to have the bus pull up and a principal get out and put a lawn sign out. We had a lot of positive feedback. New teacher mid-year check-in, Laura and her staff do a great job keeping our new teachers kind of as a cohort, making sure that they have time to talk and share what's on their mind, what concerns they may have, and then professional development that's specific for first year teachers or new to Anchor Bay. We continued our Tar Spirit t-shirts. We realized they were such a big hit 2 years ago that we ordered more and made sure that all new employees were able to have one as well. Our football tailgate seems to grow and grow and grow, so we're looking forward to seeing new and more faces next year as well, if we can have a football season with people. Staff training and remote learning survey. We've done a couple surveys of our staff, but I'm going to talk about one specifically that we just did a few weeks ago. And then staff recognition through press releases and social media. So I know I spoke quickly. I didn't want to read every slide, but I did just want to give you an update on the progress and the accomplishments that we've made in our strategic plan. It wouldn't be possible without all of the small groups that meet that are a big cross section of our staff. We have office staff on it, teachers, bus drivers. So it really is a group effort and something that, you know, the board should be very proud of. Are there any questions?
Very nice presentation, and that's awesome to see. And thanks to everybody that's involved in all the stuff that you guys have been doing. But yeah, is there any board members with questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, are you doing the planning for next school year?
I sure am.
All right.
Keep it simple. Hopefully I have good internet strength and I'm not cutting in and out.
You are. You're good.
Okay, good. Obviously, this is on the hearts and minds of everybody, is planning for the fall. And I guess I just want to start the presentation off with, there has been a lot of work already completed. You know, we're not sitting back and waiting for somebody to tell us what to do. But really, this last month was reflecting on what we just went through, what worked well, what didn't, what were some of our hurdles and pitfalls, and then also really speaking a lot with statewide organizations, best practice, people in our county that are already doing remote learning or things that they went through and successes that they had. So it's very important that people know that. And also Anchor Bay has a long history of, well, first of all, we lead in the county academically. So what we've been doing has been very successful for a long, long, long time. But one thing that we like to do is not create more anxious and anxiety and try to get out in front of something long before, you know, a lot of answers are there. So any parents that I've spoke to when they're like, you know, are we doing a funky schedule for next year? Is this happening? Is that happening? The reality is we just don't know. So we do have to kind of make sure we're following all state guidelines. Safety will remain our top priority, but we really want to stay focused on things that we do know and we can answer for and we can plan for. So with that in mind, I just want to start off by saying, of course, safety of our students and staff and our community remains our top priority, and it will drive all of our decisions. We take that to great stride. We all have done our proper cleaning, and we now have a whole COVID checklist you have to do to come into the building. So safety is top priority. The second thing that I want to say is nothing can replace face-to-face learning by our teachers. We know that, and that has been how we've been so successful. So the last 3 months were not something any of us could have planned for. I think our teachers did an amazing job, above and beyond, and really adapted well to everything that was going on. So we want to make sure that everyone understands that face-to-face learning is our plan. We certainly are going to be ready to open our doors in the fall, assuming we're allowed to, and we're going to continue offering the great programs and services that we do. But we do know that we're going to need an at-home option. We do know that there are some families that may need to wait until a vaccine is available. They might have a compromised student. So we are working tenaciously on an at-home option as well. So we also know that, you know, predictions are there will be an uptick. There could be some rolling closures. There could be some small group closures, classroom closures. It just depends on how we are able to isolate this illness in the future. But knowing that, we want to be prepared to seamlessly go from face-to-face to remote as well. So how are we going to get there? You know, what steps and what planning is already underway? Let me just say that, you know, as administrators, and I'm sure teachers too, but all of us are actively involved with all of our county groups. The principals all meet with statewide organizations locally. I meet with IT directors here at Macomb County and also within the state. The curriculum directors meet, so the superintendents meet. And through all of those networking, Macomb County, the Macomb ISD has put out a roadmap and a template that we have already started plugging in information and figuring out, you know, who else we have to get information from. We also know that Governor Whitmer put together Return to Learning Advisory Council, As Mr. Green stated earlier, I don't think any of us believe it's going to be you will do this, that, and the next, and, suddenly give us all of the information we're going to need for the fall. But I can also say it's very important for our parents and for our board members to remember that you can't compare one district to the other. We're all unique. We all have different demographics. We all have different setups that are already in our schools, technology. So we have to be very mindful that our plan has to be very specific to Anchor Bay, what we know will be successful here. Curriculum Council, they've played a role in the past. We continue to meet with them and get feedback. They've shared some of their concerns. We were able to share some of our PD that we're expecting, make sure that we're hitting the target on what our teachers need to be able to deliver the curriculum both face-to-face, possibly seamlessly into a remote, and then also how do we develop an at-home option. I already talked about sharing with our colleagues, and again, the professional development for our teachers is huge, and we will not rest until we know we can give them everything they need. Again, specific to remote learning, we do have 14 optional virtual trainings already scheduled for, it starts the second week in August, so the week of like August 10th and 17th, and I think the 24th. And those have already been shared with our staff. So the next thing you do is you take in account for all the different best practices and information we get from lots of different people, is we also reflect on where we've been. What worked well in our continuity of learning plan and what didn't. Again, what worked well was our staff. They worked nights and weekends and over spring break to help each other out. As I mentioned, we did have a lot of teachers, or a handful of teachers, that were already very well versed in Schoology. So we relied on those teachers as well as the teachers that are kind of the curriculum or grade level leaders. And so when we made the transition from enrichment learning to the continuity of learning plan, we knew with spring break in there that we were going to have to build those resources for our teachers so they could come back and have stuff already prepared for them and then build upon it. So again, I can't say enough of how well everybody did. I mean, principal, everybody jumped in. The one thing we can learn from it is accountability is key. You guys obviously had a very hearty discussion about grading. We know that any program moving forward, grading has to be a component to it. Schoology does have a grading component. It can work seamlessly into PowerSchool. We have trainings already set up for that. So we know that piece is going to be there. Again, nobody really knew when they closed our doors in March, were we only going to be gone for a couple weeks? Were we going to be back? The governor, came out and said nobody was going to be hurt. Nobody was going to be retained. So it did hurt a lot of districts, or it hurt the state really in making sure that there was accountability. And also speaking on that, and you guys talked about it earlier, we have to be mindful that we had a lot of students who were facing COVID in a very different way. Either their parents were essential workers and not home, or suddenly their parents' livelihood relied on them working all day at home, which meant their home computer was in use. So, I mean, we have to take into consideration all the different items that were taking place. And if I didn't mention it already, our Anchor-based staff as well had to teach from home and also maintain their own families, and in many instances be the parents of their own kids in their own districts doing their work. So all of that was very interesting, and we've reflected, we've learned, we know some things we would do differently, we know some things we would do better. We did learn that Schoology is very capable of supporting our K-12 learning management system. We know our plan pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, was to have our whole district fully utilizing Schoology. We were going to be secondary by the fall of 2020, and we were going to be elementary by the fall of 2021. So as a technology person, I can tell you, while I don't like anything about the pandemic from a health and safety standpoint, it definitely got our district and our teachers on board quicker and faster than we ever could have imagined. So, that, if anything, was a plus that came out of it. The other thing that we reflected on that we know we need to do, and we were already planning it because we had pilots with parents already taking place in our district with Schoology, but is to expand that parent piece and student training piece. So we also have August training set up for parents, so we can walk them through. Moving forward, all parents will have an access code, which is different than how it was this go around. They kind of had to access it through their student. They will have their own separate access code. There's an app that they can use on their phone just as a parent. And I think that's going to help a lot. I know it's going to help a lot. So garnering input, that again came up tonight. You know, one, we started with our curriculum council, got some good discussions going to really help us. I have followed every county and state survey known to man that's out there. Again, I'm a big believer in you never ask a question that you don't want to know the answer. So if I asked a question, you know, do you want me to supply you Wi-Fi? The obvious answer is yes. And as you just know where our budget is, I can't provide Wi-Fi for everybody. So I know I have to have resources to give families, but we want to be very mindful and thoughtful when we do seek input. We want to have scenarios and plans built so we can tweak them based on feedback. So to answer the question, yes, a parent survey is in the works. I have 3 or 4 drafted, and we're going to time those a little bit better. What I am finding out from all my colleagues in the county is most of them did a survey now, and all of them are repeating it in August, because again, as a parent, I might answer one way right now because right now it seems like the world is freeing up and it doesn't seem as scary, but August could be a very different time. So it's really important to get information that's going to help us really best plan for Anchor Bay. Committee work is already identified. We've already identified what groups we want: remote learning, technology, curriculum, the logistics, how do we register. So we have all of those outlined already. And I know Terry and Joe, they can jump in at any time too, but you know, we are seeking a good cross section to make sure that we have voices heard from all different aspects of the district on those. Again, we try to be very mindful in our communication. We try to send communication when we have actual information to share, dates, expectations, when they can expect to hear something. So hopefully you guys have noticed that, and I know you receive copies of it as well. So we're trying to make sure that, you know, we don't send a communication and the next day have to say, oh, nope, that's not really what it's going to be. It's going to be this. And again, our curriculum council plays a key role in our professional development, and also they provide lots of feedback. So I do want to just touch a little bit on the survey we did conduct, which is our teacher remote instruction survey. We had 191 respondents. 75 of the teachers stated they adapted well or loved remote teaching when asked about their experience. Again, they were able to answer, you know, it didn't go well. Considering the circumstances, it was okay. I wouldn't want to do it forever, but I adapted well. So 113 stated their experience was okay considering the circumstances and better than expected. And then we asked, you know, for actual feedback. Ashley and I have read every single comment on there. We've put them into categories so we know a little bit more about the best way to train our teachers. Should we be able to do face-to-face, lab settings, and also remote? Only 9 teachers reported that their students were not engaged in remote instruction. I, of course, you know, can look into all of the Schoology courses. In fact, I have that right here. You know, we had an amazing amount of, we had 197,000 student submissions for assignments and assessments. So let me say that a number again, 197,000 during that closure time. So it's pretty amazing. So our teachers were doing a lot in a short period of time. Some of the hurdles, we specifically asked what hurdles the teachers faced in their remote instruction, and then the hurdles they believed was the hurdle for the learning of the students. Okay, so it's a little different there, and it's from their perspective. But you'll see, you're not surprised to see either of any of these answers, which was for them to to be able to provide remote instruction. Obviously, they didn't have time to adequately plan. Our teachers are professionals. They like to come into work and be prepared and have a game plan, and obviously everything was new and different. Training was a hurdle. Technology issues, of course, everyone went home. Some people are sharing with other people. Some people need their students on it. Some people, don't have good equipment at home. We did make it so our teachers could come into their classroom at any time. We did allow them to check it out. We did have 20 teachers that checked out laptops or document cameras or things from their classroom. Parent support was one of their big issues, saying that parents maybe weren't engaged and providing the same amount of guidance as they would when it's face-to-face. And then family obligations. Secondary students oftentimes had to help with their younger siblings, and the younger students, elementary students maybe had to go be cared for by a grandparent because their parents were working, so that became a little bit of an issue. Hurdles facing learning for students, same thing rose to the top, which is parent support and guidance, personal obligations, and technology access. We did loan out 83 laptops to students and families that requested a need for that. I guess I just want to summarize that planning is underway. There's much to still do. Don't get me wrong. I think all of us are bracing for having our roller skates on for July and August. We will not rest. We will be working on every scenario and building them and being ready for whatever is thrown our way. I just want to make sure our parents and the board are well aware that we will have an at-home option. We're working on that, and we will also have a face-to-face option. Our committee work is going to begin in July. We're pretty close to the July 4th time here. We know the governor's releasing hers. So I think, I don't think Terry and Joe have a whole outline for all of the different groups that are meeting in July and August. And then again, as soon as we have concrete details to share, we will certainly do that. Safety will drive all of our decisions. We'll make sure that we're keeping all of the safety precautions and standards in place. So with that, if there's any questions, I know Terry and Joe are standing by as well.
Yeah, very nice presentation, Anita. That was very informative, very nice. It's great to hear all the planning. And I'm glad you touched on those questions from that parent earlier, because I know you guys have been, in deep conversations about all this stuff, and you're definitely not waiting to hear what someone else might say. You guys are forging ahead and going to adjust if you need to, but you're definitely going to have a plan in place. So any questions or comments from the board on Anita's presentation? All right, we'll go to, keeping with that, the Chromebook award recommendation.
Yes, let me get out of this really fast. I'm no longer sharing my screen. All right, I don't know if the board wants to make the motion first and then have discussion, or if you want me to give a brief background. We did discuss this in curriculum committee tonight, but what you have before you is a recommendation to purchase 300 Chromebooks using our bond funds. And I guess I want to preface it with, we have been very, very, very stickler stewards, financial stewards of our bond dollars when it comes to technology. We make a little go a very long way. We stretch it as far as we can so that we are able to do the refreshes that we've been able to do. We have completed everything on the bond list in terms of technology, and with the remaining funds, we just plan on doing lab refreshes. As you know, you just agreed to servers. That was part of our cycle as well. So the money that I am put forth tonight is $62,748, and that would get us 300 Chromebooks. My rationale for the 300 Chromebooks right now is just, again, reflecting on what we just went through. What we did when people needed computers is essentially we took apart our carts and notebooks that we have in our buildings and made those available for people. By purchasing 300, the way I'm looking at it right now is to just be prepared, to be cautiously prepared for anything that might come our way. So on one hand, 300 Chromebooks will be absolutely utilized within our buildings. They would be dispersed throughout our buildings if nobody needed them. And when I say nobody needed them, that means depending on how many people register for fully remote or at-home learning, we would be able to provide them with a tool. And then secondly, should we have an immediate closure or a small closure or classroom closure, we would be able to hand out Chromebooks at that time as well. But if neither of those two scenarios happen, these 300 Chromebooks will be well used, well accepted. As you know, all of the testing that goes on in our schools is completely online. It takes a great deal of time in our buildings, funneling kids through all of our labs and utilizing the Chromebooks and the notebooks that we have now. So my rationale is to essentially use bond funds that were earmarked for the 2022 refresh. So, you know, taking a little bit off of there. When we get to that point in time, we would obviously have to budget differently and or, you know, maybe at that time go for another bond issue, whatever that might look like. But it's a very small amount of money. I look at it as a low cost, high impact. 300 Chromebooks will instantly be used and dispersed and put us in the right position for whatever might come our way come August and into the fall.
I'll make a motion that we approve it as presented.
Motion by Mr. Middlestat. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. DeWitt. Is there any discussion on the purchases of the 300 Chromebooks? Seeing none, we'll vote by roll.
Ms. Agavetti Hendershot?
Yes.
Mr. DeRue?
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat?
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Birkmeyer, yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you for those awesome reports, and it's great to have the 300 Chromebooks to make a good impact on the district and move us in the right direction when it comes to that, because obviously there's going to be more and more of that as we move forward. So is there any open forum people that would like to participate in open forum right now? I don't see any chat boxes here. Tim, do you see any chats?
No, I don't see anybody's requested to speak to the board either.
All right. So move on to the consent agenda. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda, the minutes of the regular meeting of 5/27/20, the financial report, and the MHSAA resolution.
Have a
What's that?
comment on the minutes.
Okay.
Under the minutes, generally when you have a business motion and second, there isn't a blow-by-blow discussion in the documentation. I understand when board member comments in the minutes contain all the comments, but under new hire, we had a motion that wasn't approved and I got a sheet and a half of comments. In a business meeting set of minutes, you shouldn't have that unless the person says, I wish to be on record with a comment. So I think all those comments, the blow-by-blow comments from everyone should be deleted as part of the official board minutes. That's just, we generally don't even do that.
Yeah, especially on one that wasn't even a motion.
No.
Okay.
So I would recommend under new hire, you put down a motion by Mr. Moses to approve a new hire football coach. Motion fails to floor. That's all I would put under that category.
All right. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda of the 5/27/20 meeting with the financial report, the MHSAA resolution, and the minutes as corrected?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Ms. Heddershot. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Oh, let's vote by roll.
Ms. Agavetti Hendershot?
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat,
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Moses,
Yes.
and Burkmeyer, yes.
Motion passes. Superintendent comments.
Of them at the start of the meeting, but I also want to bring to the board's attention that Mike Lansdale, who represents Local 214, had called me today and had brought to my attention a concern about last month's board meeting, and that one of the items of a part-time teacher was being discussed, and the concern was it violated board policy, and it was illegal or against contracts. And I just want to make it clear, and that was what the Human Resource Department brought forward. That is, we did not violate any policy. Nothing illegal was done whatsoever. And I just want to, in the future, if we do believe that anything is being done illegal or inappropriate, that either the board president or myself would be contacted immediately. And I shared with Mike his concern, and I did address it, and I told him that I would, address his concern.
Yes, I know that was a last meeting come up, kind of put Laura in a bad spot. Sorry about that, Laura. And it was after the meeting. I know I got educated myself, is that there was obviously nothing was improper about the offer going out to the coach and the teaching position, and everything was done above board, and that just needs to be on the record. So I get that. Board comments. We'll go Steve Middlestat.
Right, just kind of off the wall policy thing, but I was thinking about, as we look at this budget and how we dropped off the edge a bit in terms of revenue or expenditure, that to avoid those kind of issues with budgets, I think we need to create a policy that salary benefit increases should not be sooner than we get the FTE per pupil funds approved from the state and the governor. I think that was one of the areas that we probably shouldn't have done, but I think for future boards, we should at least set the policy, and if they want to override it, great, but I think it gives a general guideline that we really shouldn't be offering. We want to treat everybody fair, we want to respect everyone, but people we shouldn't be under a lot of pressure to give out money if we don't know if we have it. So I just thought that would be kind of an off season for giving raises, I know for sure, but I think there'd be something to talk about at this point, such that in the future we don't run into that problem. Just a comment. Other than that, appreciate all the efforts in the district on everything that's going on in the last 2 to 3 months. You always see all the signs in the community. We see the bus is going around and the food's getting delivered. So everything's done very excellently, and I think we're kind of one of the leaders in the area that taking care of our community quite well. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Ms. DeWitt?
I have to reiterate that might be something policy would like to look into, making sure that we know what we are actually getting from the state before there are any approval of raises or approval of contracts. Because being fiscally responsible has to be one of our main objectives as a board. And so that might be a good thing to put into place. I just want to thank a central administration, all the teachers, all the support staff, because these have been an extremely difficult, challenging last 4 months. And I just wanted to commend all of them, their dedication to trying to provide the best possible education for kids. And I also would like to reach out to the community and just tell everyone to stay safe and follow guidelines wherever you can, because we need all of you in this community. And we can only do that if we make the effort to stay safe together. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Moses?
I just wanted to, I agree with everything that everybody said there. But I want to give special thanks and goodbye to all the teachers and paras and bus drivers and administrators that are going to be retiring. Appreciate your service. You guys have been here a long time, and I want to send a special shout out to Anita from Ashley. She's a parent. She was a wonderful lady. Really gonna miss her. So that's all I got.
Okay, Mr. Green?
I do have one question, so I can kind of close the loop on this whole grading thing. Hopefully Mr. McDonald can answer it for me. Did our international students receive grades in any way, shape, or form for this second semester?
No, they were treated the same as any other student and received credit or incomplete, no letter grade for the shutdown period.
Great, thank you. I'll just kind of reiterate what Ms. DeWitt said, and you're all going to say as we go through. I appreciate what our support staff has done. Our teachers did a wonderful job. Short notice, and I hope everyone in the community is staying safe and staying healthy. Thank you, Mr. Drew.
All right. Ms. Hendershot?
Again, everybody has pretty much reiterated the same sentiments that I have, as appreciation for all the hard work of the teachers and the staff and the support staff and the administration, and congratulations to anybody who is retiring. You deserve it. Enjoy in these crazy times. Not sure anybody's going to be going on any vacations anytime soon, but take some time, reflect, rest with your families, and hopefully the fall brings us one step closer to normalcy, whatever normal will be in the future.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bergmeyer?
Okay. You know, we've gone through a lot. I also want to, I appreciate all of our staff from administration down to the building levels individually, transportation, custodial, kitchen, everybody doing their part. I'm not looking, we talked a lot about the budget tonight. I'm not looking forward to making these cuts. Personally, my personal philosophy is to try and keep these cuts out of the visibility and realm of our kids as much as possible. But I'm not naive to think that and realize that that's very vague still, and that, it's almost everything's visible to our kids in some shape or form in a school. So I just want employees to know, no matter what sector you're in our district, that I value you. I don't take any of this lightly. I realize the impact that, your employment will have on, your own career, yourselves, your families moving forward. And so I just want to convey that, everybody up here on the board, nobody up here is immune to the effects of the budget right now. At some point, the budgets and contracts came across all of us, and every single one of us did things, made decisions that ultimately, put us where we are today. But I know that there is not one person up here that is immune from that. We need to stop pointing fingers at each other and just move forward at this point. And I'm fine with that. I'm on board with that. I also want to circle back. Mr. Woodside made some comments, and I will own up to my words last meeting. I will honestly admit, I don't recall saying the word illegal, but it was pointed out to me And more than one person confirmed that it did happen. So I apologize for saying the word illegal, because that was not my intent in terms of, you know, the law. I meant, if I said illegal, I know that I meant in terms of possibly violating a contract, not like a, you know, a federal large scale issue on that point. Illegal was probably a very poor word. I said it, that was me. I can own that. And I do apologize to those people that involved and affected.
Oh, thank you. I think on that, like everybody, you know, the administration's been doing a great job. The teachers have been outstanding. All the support staff, everybody's been knocking it out of the park the past 3 months, whatever it's been now. It's been crazy times. I guess what I'll say is, you know, as far as past commitments we made to employees, as Lisa would put, you know, the point in the fingers, yeah, we made some decisions as a new board, maybe, and giving away some raises, and I don't regret it. You know, obviously nobody would have imagined that we were going to come into this pandemic. But at this point, I think one of the only things we can do, and it's as board members and really as a district, and I forgot who it was that mentioned it earlier, but about contacting our state reps, our state senators within the state. I don't know how much they're going to be able to do to help us, but on the federal level, we need to use whatever we have. I know I'm calling both senators, all the congressmen, women that I know. We need to, you know, they're, whatever your political background, I mean, they're printing money down over there in DC, and they need to not, you know, forget about schools at this time. I know I talked to Mr. Moses prior to the meeting, and he, you know, echoed that with, you know, it seems like when they get to schools, they forget, you know, that we're going to need some money as well. So, you know, anybody out there that's listening, you know, write your federal officials, and, you know, Lisa, with the stuff you just talked about with Mr. Woodside and the, you know, comments to Ms. Gonzalez, I just think we need to have better communication within the board. We're doing a lot better. I think all of us are talking to each other a lot more, and this has caused us to do that. So any issues that come up, I know my phone's always on. Lately, I've been busy, so I might not get back right away, but I know if you have any issues or hear of anything happening that you think is wrong, just reach out, and that goes to any board member out there. So with that, a motion to adjourn is in order.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Ms. Akavetti Hedershot. Is there a second?
Support.
Last vote by roll, Lisa.
Was that Green that supported?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Akavetti Hedershot?
Yes.
Mr. Drew?
Yes.
Mr. Middlestat?
Yes.
Ms. DeWitt?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
And Burkmeyer, yes.
All right, motion passes. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.